Welcome to the Gaelan Trombley Show. You can find me on Facebook at Gaelan Trombley, on Instagram at Gaelan Trombley, and on YouTube at Gaelan Trombley. Spelling GaelanTrombley. Enjoy the show. Welcome to the Gaelan Trombley Show. Welcome to episode 75 of the Gaelan Trombley Show. I have Jon Mulholland here in studio. Jon has been working on me for, I think, 6 years now, which at time flies, and I know he's been a long time practitioner in chiropractic and a bunch of other stuff. He's an interesting guy and has done quite a bit. I got a lot of stuff here I was kind of going through, but I'll let you kind of expand on that. But Jon, welcome.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
Jon, for anybody that does not know you, just give them a quick rundown, kind of where you came from. How'd you get to 2020, Jon Mulholland?
Jeez, I'm old, man. That's a long story. A quick story. Born here. I'm a local guy. I was born in Saranac Lake. Grew up in Elizabethtown till I was about 7, I think, and then moved to Plattsburgh. And I've been a city kid ever since. Graduated PHS, Plattsburgh High School in 92, and then went on to Ithaca College, graduated, ran track and field down at Ithaca for 4 years, and then ended up in long story, ended up in chiropractic school for 4 years after undergrad, and eventually traveled around a little bit, worked as an associate doc down on Long Island for a year or two, and then decided to open my own just small town practice back in Elizabethtown originally, back in 2002. Added a second location in Plattsburgh several years after that, and after some kind of weird traveling, I've been here ever since.
So when did you want to get into chiropractic? Like, was that kind of like in college that interested you?
No. A lot of chiropractors seem to be a family business. You see, I went to school with a ton of guys and girls that were, their parents were chiropractors, or one of them. And I really never had that magical story. To be perfectly honest, I was very confused. I was an exercise science major at Ithaca. Always a sports guy. That was me. I was just the jock, played every sport, 3 seasons through, at PHS, and ran track, like I said, through Ithaca for 4 years, and always just kind of a jock, but was really torn. Really enjoyed the exercise science, knew I wanted to do something probably halfway through undergrad in healthcare, but wasn't sure whether it was going to be PT, medical school, really all over the board. And what kind of changed me, I really didn't decide until, I want to say, my senior year, when applications were basically due. I actually went and talked to a couple of primary care docs in town that I knew, and a couple of chiropractors that I knew, and just kind of spent a couple hours. A couple of them I think I spent most of the day with, just shadowing them, kind of saw what the day-to-day life was like. And that's kind of when I made the decision. Again, maybe it was dumb luck. The primary care docs I followed were not super happy with how their practices were taking place for a lot of different reasons. Pharmaceutical companies, the similar complaint was they spent a lot of their day writing scripts. Now, I'm not generalizing that good or bad. It was more their hands were being forced in a way. And that they didn't seem super happy, to be honest with you. The chiropractors were a little different. They seemed a little more happy-go-lucky, probably maybe a few more demands too. We can't prescribe in New York, so we don't have a lot of those pressures of writing scripts and things like that. But more so, which clicked to me, was working with their hands, that they were kind of the best of both worlds. You had a little bit of some physical therapy stuff, a little bit of the chiropractic, but just getting your hands on people and working on them and seeing an improvement in how their pain and how they were functioning. A lot of times, even in that first or second visit, seemed rewarding to me, just watching them work on people. And it turns out, that's been a pretty big selling point for me over the years. Not that after, this will be my 20th year of practice, believe it or not. And not that you certainly don't get burned out at times and have your frustrations, but I think working on people coming in my office, partly because of the way I've sculpted my reputation as far as what I'm good at and who I work best with, a lot of the people that come in my office want to get better. And that's the key, is that they're just looking for advice. They just want to be told what to do so they can keep running, keep lifting, And my older patients, they want to be able to do their yard work and lift up their grandkids and all that. And they're willing to do whatever I tell them. They just need a semi-educated brain, which sometimes I can be, depending on the topic, to kind of guide them in the right direction. So that's appealing to me.
So that's one of the things with chiropractic, and a lot of places. If you go and they tell you, okay, you need to do 1, 2, and 3 of these little exercises, or like going to like physical therapy, and they tell you to do the bands or whatever.
Yep.
So you've had good success with people following. And I know it's not everybody, because in a perfect world it would be, but do you find that, obviously the ones that do follow what you're saying get better? Because it's a proven,
most of the time.
Yeah, it's a proven kind of trial and error over years and years and studies and stuff that stuff works. But have you had a hard time dealing with that, with clients taking kind of going home and doing the homework?
Yes. Yeah. So I still run into that problem a lot. Part of that, and I'll be honest, part of that is sometimes the chiropractor, the therapist's fault, is that they just overwhelm their patients with too many exercises, too many recommendations. I mean, I've had people come to me where I said, next visit, bring in what your previous chiropractor or previous physical therapist told you to do. I want to see what exercises. And they bring in like a sheet that, even if you worked quick, it would take you 30, 45 minutes to work through, and they're supposed to do that 5, 6, 7 days a week. It's just not going to happen. And so what I've kind of, and I was probably doing the same thing the first few years of practice and just over experience. I've learned 1 or 2 things a visit. If they're super motivated, real athletic and are geared, maybe 2 or 3 different things to kind of work on. Yep. I want you to foam roll this. I want you to do this strengthening move. And I want you to kind of pay attention to this thing at work, that might be contributing to your pain. But typically 1 or 2 is the most. And if you don't overwhelm them and you make the exercises super easy to do, where they don't need to necessarily lay on the floor all the time, they don't need special equipment, you can give them something simple to do that they can do anywhere. They tend to be more compliant. But like you said, there's still a certain percentage that I find extremely frustrating when I do everything right, keep it simple, and they still refuse. Those are the ones I still struggle with.
Well, I think it was like when I used to go, well, I forgot I think I went originally for my shoulder, which got better really fast. And then I've just been going for like neck and more just alignment. But you always told me like the neck thing was just that like tuck the chin. I think that's really the only thing you've ever given me for my neck, and that's the only thing I need. Like if I do it, it works.
Yep.
And I know the times when I do it or don't do it. And I always go in, I'm like, I didn't stretch this time. Like I've been getting out of stretching, or there's sometimes where I go into a very big stretch of time where I'm mobilizing, and I feel a million times better. But it's just a self-care. Because usually I want to go into you saying I feel great and have you just work on me, and I'm like, I feel even better, and then I'm good to go.
It's tough, but that's exactly right. So what you were calling with these, we call neck retractions or cervical spine retractions, chin tucks, sometimes you hear them called. And it's just a simple drill to undo the constant damage most of us do sitting all day with our shoulders shrugged, heads kind of jutted forward over the computer. And what is an exercise you can do every hour or two for a few seconds to kind of just retrain your body to keep that head over the shoulders? So perfect example. So
I was reading a couple of these things. So to kind of get into the fun stuff, I guess, and then we'll go into a bunch of other things. So in your profession, you've worked, I'm just going to do a couple things. You've worked with the New Zealand team at the 2012 Summer Olympics. You've worked with Team USA Track and Field, Team USA Bobsled and Skeleton, the Paralympics, the Italian men's skeleton team. Yep. I think that's kind of and then I guess talk about your, because then I read this article, which I think I read back in the day when you had it. We did some digging because I knew some stuff. I wanted to get the dates and times right. So tell us your experience at the Olympics, because this one's with you at the opening ceremonies. So I guess kind of show the tell the involvement of all your Olympic experience.
So it all started. I mean, I guess I have to go back a little bit. I kind of grew up in an Olympic family. Like I've always just been super pumped about the Olympics, just as a fan, even as a kid. My mother and father were involved in bobsledding in the 60s and early 70s. So I kind of grew up, they were into the Olympics. We were in Lake Placid walking around during the Miracle on Ice game when I was a little kid. So always pumped about the Olympics. So a few years into practice in Elizabethtown, I had built up a decent reputation as just being a good guy. I referred people out when necessary and developed a pretty good reputation with a few of the orthopedists in town. And long story short, I was over in Lake Placid one day, and I had become kind of friendly over the phone with Dr. Byrne, one of the orthopedic surgeons over at Lake Placid Sports Medicine. And I said, I'm going to swing in and say hello. I knew he had officer. And I swung in and said, hey, just never really met you face to face. We've shared a lot of patients, just saying hello. And he said, yeah, John, he goes, I've heard good things about you. He goes, I got a suggestion for you. Would you be interested in coming up to the Olympic Training Center occasionally in Lake Placid and working on some of the athletes? They've kind of demanded, chiropractic care. And at the time, there was no chiropractor on staff at the Olympic Training Center, believe it or not. Now, this is going back to
what year?
2005-ish,
Okay.
2006. Wow. So, yeah, not that long ago. And now they're at every training center. There's multiple, like out in Colorado Springs, the big ones. Lake Placid has a full-time chiro on staff, but back then they had nothing. They had their athletic trainers. They had a physical therapist, depending on who was staffed at the time. But athletes were specifically demanding that they wanted access to chiropractic care. And so what started as just a dumb luck, saying hello to a doc and thanking him for the referrals, became, I'd be going up, I'd drive up here to Lake Placid, depending on the season, once a week, sometimes 2 or 3 times a month, in the winter more often because there were more athletes there. Because Lake Placid's an interesting training center. It's not exclusively, but mainly winter sport athletes for obvious reasons, with the bobsled track, the luge, the skeleton, the ski jumps, the Nordic. So I started getting my foot in the door and treating a lot of these winter sport athletes in Lake Placid. And I guess they liked the job I was doing after a year and a half. And so I started getting asked to travel with the bobsled and skeleton team. So basically they'd say, hey, we're going out for a camp in Calgary in October. Can you come out with us for a week and a half, 2 weeks, and treat them? That turned into, can you cover a couple of weeks in Europe the next year? Can you do that? So that's where I started to really travel. And I did that for several years, worked a couple of world championships with them. And then with Dr. Byrne, funny enough, the two of us went out and were a good chunk of the medical staff for the 2010 Paralympic Games out in Vancouver. Oh, yeah. So I spent a month bouncing between Vancouver and Whistler, treating all the Paralympic athletes. And I'll tell you, I didn't have a ton of experience working with that group. Most of the team members I was working with on Nordic skiing were ex-military. These are guys that were, and girls, but mainly guys that had lost. One of the guys won a bronze medal in biathlon, was a double amputee below the hip, was a sniper, had a car bomb go off in Afghanistan, blew both his legs off. Another guy was a paratrooper, paralyzed from the chest down, rappelling out of a helicopter and fell. Wow. So these are the type, and it just blew you away because these athletes are on the same courses. Like I was assigned Nordic skiing. Yeah. So every day I would go to their practices, to their races. I get to ski with them. And then we'd treat them in the afternoon. And then, I'd treat anybody in the afternoon back at the training center. I'd be sitting there. These guys and girls are skiing the Nordic course.
Nordic's cross country, right?
Cross country. Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Skiing the same course, 3 weeks prior that Billy DeMong and a bunch of these, able-bodied athletes were hammering. And these people are skiing in chairs. So in other words, just it's a wheelchair with skis. So they're just poling the same hills.
Or tougher biomechanics, basically. Yes. Ergonomics or whatever.
Well, it's the majority leg anyway.
Yeah.
And so these people, I had another girl just amputee below the shoulder. Skiing with no poles. There were blind athletes that would literally have a guide skiing in front of them with a speaker, like a fanny pack speaker, barking out turns.
Wow.
And they were completely blinded. If anybody's ever cross-country skied up at like Van Hovenberg, some of those like icy downhills in the woods are pretty terrifying with your eyes. Yeah. And you can imagine just putting blacked out goggles over and trusting your buddy in front of you to tell you, a 3-turn, a 7-turn to the right, and not killing yourself. So that was my first. But we got to walk in opening ceremonies there. It was like 70-something thousand people in British Columbia in the big Vancouver Dome. And then it was just, I know a long story, but then it just became a bobsled connection reached out to me a couple of years later, the year later, actually, 2011, and said, hey, I'm the strength coach now with the New Zealand track cycling team. These are the big guys. These are the ones the sprinters that go on the velodrome indoors. Oh, yeah. That you see the wooden banks, the huge bank turns, and just sprint. They're almost doing the track stands to try to psych each other out. And then they'll just hammer. And these guys will be doing, 45, 50 miles an hour on a bike. And he goes, hey, we're going to be in Pennsylvania for the summer. I love what you did with some of my skeleton athletes. Would you be willing to drive down for a week and just look at some of the boys, see if you have any suggestions, work on them? And I did, and it clicked. So I got this super cool phone call a few months later that said, hey, we're a year out from the London Olympics. We're putting together our Olympic staff for the New Zealand cycling team for the games. We're lining up our managers, our nutritionists, our sports psychiatrists, our strength coaches. We want you to do our medical. Not obviously the medical. They had an MD, but he wouldn't be traveling. He was basically there for consults if someone got sick. Okay. So I'd be the only true, I was combo, chiro, PT, athletic trainer, anything needed to be boarded or head injury. That was my job. And so I spent the year, I'd be gone with them to a camp or a World Cup event, and then I'd come back here to Plattsburgh for a few weeks. Then I'd be gone for a few weeks, and I'd come home for a few weeks. And ultimately, it culminated in, from basically the 1st of June through the Olympics at the end of August, I was in Europe with them from Olympic camp to Olympic camp. And then I ended up spending the full, I think, close to 4 weeks in the Olympic Village in London, which, as an Olympic freak and a track and field guy and a geek, I was in heaven for 3 weeks, just walking around, seeing all these
summer
guys.
games.
Summer games, man, it doesn't get any bigger.
So you were walking around with, so who'd you see that was known like in 2012? Well, you must have ran into a few of
the biggest of the big is Usain Bolt.
Yeah,
it didn't get any bigger than him for several years. Because the NBA guys were there.
Yeah,
but they never stayed in the Village.
I was gonna say I didn't think so.
No, they never were on. So I never saw them walking around. But Bolt, you could never get close to Bolt because the funny was we'd be in the dining hall and that was always the fun time. You'd have 30 minutes, maybe an hour if you were lucky to just relax. And you got to realize this dining hall for a month. I forget the stat exactly. You'd look it up, but I remember the London papers used to say, I think they could fit, it was 900 double-decker London buses inside this bubble. So it was basically the size. I remember I did the math. It's the size of a super Walmart, like here in Plattsburgh. It's like 125,000 square feet, just the dining hall.
Oh, my God.
Open, imagine this for those of you that like to eat, 24 hours a day for the whole month. You could go in there at 2 or 3 in the morning and get coffee from any food or coffee, but food from any nationality in the world. You go in there at like 3 a.m. and get like Ethiopian coleslaw. They had the Caribbean section. They'd have the the African food and this, and so it was just great. In fact, a funny little story: the strength coach Angus, who's the one who really was my foot in the door to the whole thing. First day there, we go in, I'm sitting next to him, and I just come back with this tray of it was smoked duck. It was, gourmet type food if you want it. And then, of course, the rumors are true. They do have a McDonald's in the dining hall, a full McDonald's, and it's surprisingly busy, considering this is a 4-year peak for these athletes. Yeah. So anyway, I'm sitting next to Angus. He's a typical Southern New Zealander. Big guy, former Olympic bobsledder for New Zealand.
Is he built like a rugby player?
Yeah, he's about 205 pounds and just square-jawed, shaved head, tough guy. A little bit like a smaller Jocko Willink, in looks and everything. Yep. And he just grunts and, and he just, without stopping, he looks over and sees this gigantic tray of food just spilling off my plate, and I'm just eating, and he looks over and he says, record's 25. And just keeps going to eating. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? And he goes, record's 25. And I'm like, what are you talking about, Gus? He goes, the last guy gained 25 pounds in the 4 weeks at the Olympics. So he saw that first meal and was just setting the tone. So I kind of dialed it back after that a little bit, tried to keep kind of low carb. But it was a pretty interesting experience.
Did you see like Phelps at all or any of those guys?
Phelps a couple times.
Would he stay in the Olympic Village?
I don't remember if he was staying full time. The thing was with the Village, so they built this thing from scratch out in eastern London, kind of in the dock. It was really not a great area, I think, from what I've read before. Yeah. And they just built this. It's a city. Again, I'm remembering from 8 years ago, but I want to say that they're these tall dormitory style buildings where all the athletes were housed, and I want to say, between coaches and athletes, the structures could hold 12 or 14,000 people. So you're talking, crazy. 3/4 the size of Plattsburgh in this relatively small area for a month. Mm-hmm. And the big countries like USA would have a whole tower. They had that many staff and athletes, so it was the USA house.
So you guys stayed? Oh no, you weren't with them.
No, I was with New Zealand.
That's right. Yeah.
So we had our own too. New Zealand was big enough. Australia, and then the other countries would just take floors of the dorms, and they were very nice, simple but nice. But there were 2012 was big security issues. That was the big one since, well, not the big one, but it was, London was a pretty big hotspot even then for terrorist stuff. And so there was, I can't even describe the security. The couple times we got to leave the village, it's like Fort Knox, where you'd have to go through security fence after security fence just to go out and, walk around the mall or something.
So the mall, like the London Mall, like a mall out in London. Normally.
Yeah, huge. Okay. It's actually, I think at the time it was the biggest mall in Europe, was built just outside the village.
For the purpose of this?
I don't. I think it might have even been there before. Okay. But just every once in a while we'd have a free half day off, or we could just go explore the city a little bit.
So when you say like the village, were the actual competition like locations part of the village?
Some kind of, but no, most of them were off site. So you'd have to take secure buses. Staff and athletes would be bused to the track venue. They'd be bused to the swimming complex.
I would think track and the swimming would have been right there.
No, so the village, at least in this case, was all basically housing, medical, dining, and like weight training. So it was basically the self-inclusive kind of village where they lived, ate, slept, kind of trained, and in some cases. If they were just lifting and stuff. But if you wanted to run on the track, they had scheduled practice times where you'd get bussed. And it was just a queue of dozens and dozens of buses would take you all over to different parts of London to train and compete.
So the Olympics are the summer is roughly 3 weeks, right?
Yeah, about that. Yeah.
So at least from my memory, watching, because I'm the same thing. I love watching the Olympics. When the Olympics are on, I get pumped. But the first week and a half is all swimming, but it's the second half is the track and field. So if you were where was the biking part of it? Like where did you fall in?
Throughout the whole time.
Really?
Because there's so many different events. It's a little like track and field in that regard. Is that you've got women, you've got men, you've got the sprinters, you've got the more distance type track cyclists, and then even with just my sprint boys, as we used to call them, the five guys I worked with most. There's multiple events. So there's team sprint, there's solo sprints, there's events called the Kieran and the one, all these different events. So I was busy pretty much from beginning to end, which kind of I mean, listen, it's, I don't want to complain. Yeah. It would have been nice to have a little more free time. But we were pretty busy right through. We'd get some tickets occasionally for free.
Yeah.
So I got to go see the heavyweight Olympic weightlifting finals one night. Cool. We got, which that's awesome.
Yeah.
And then for me, the dream night was we got to go over and kind of snuck into the track and field venue twice. But the big one was right toward the end. We were about 15, 20 rows off the track right at turn one, so right after the finish line.
Yep.
And I got to see Usain Bolt win the 200 meter.
Oh, wow.
And he did his whole lightning pose right in front of us. And then I got to see the world record shattered in the 800 just an hour earlier.
Really?
First guy ever to run a minute 40 for a half mile, which wrap your mind around that.
Yeah.
So that was probably my favorite just night as a spectator. Was just great.
I would love to see if it's ever in the U.S. I probably would go.
Yeah.
Because now Canada's kind of cool too, but they always have it. It's in a city typically. Yeah. So the same thing. U.S. Like it's Vancouver is probably the closest. I mean, obviously Montreal had. I don't know if Montreal would ever get it again. I guess it could, but it depends on. The other thing I've heard from the Olympics, a lot of these places don't make money on this event because it's so expensive.
Quite the opposite.
You think they make money or
no? Quite, they lose. They don't only make money.
Sorry, I meant they don't make money. Yeah, they lose money on it.
They lose a ton.
I think it was like Beijing. Like they considered the Olympic venue like a ghost town now because nobody lives there for whatever reason.
And that goes way back. Even like Sarajevo, it's like a war zone,
really?
And then it's some of these places are just abandoned. Sochi. In Russia was another one that I haven't read anything recently, but was just a lot of cases just abandoned.
And that was was that 14?
Sochi was
was
16
it? That was
Rio.
Was it winter?
14.
Which is crazy to think about how fast these move. Because I remember London like it was this. I remember Vancouver, and then obviously Brazil and with Pyeongchang or whatever.
Yep.
So,
South Korea.
It's crazy how fast they move, which is every 2 years. Oh.
Well, it didn't used to be, though. That's why it seems like it moves so fast now. So I forget the year it switched, but historically the winter and summer games were the same year.
Yeah.
Forever. It just switched in like the mid-90s, I want to say off the top of my head, 96 maybe.
It could have been, yeah.
There was Torino in Italy.
Yep.
Was 2000, not 96, I'm sorry, 2000. 6, I want to say. But yeah, they switched to every other year, which, just good for fans, but they do come fast.
I think I remember watching the first Olympics that I really watched was 98, which was Nagano.
Nagano, yeah.
And that was the first one I remember, because to 96, I think, was Atlanta.
Yep.
And that was, I think I watched, was it Michael Johnson running then in that time?
Atlanta, yes.
Okay, so
Yep.
I think I remember vividly watching him, and I was a little kid at the time, and then I really remember 2000, and from then on I remember all of them. But I'd like to see it come back with something within either New York, Chicago, or Boston or something. And I don't know.
But you can see, though, just look at the last couple bidding processes.
Yeah.
You don't have very many bids. And they were, unfortunately racked with controversy the last 5-10 years with the International Olympic Committee, basically paying, being bribed and cities bribing the IOC officials to pick them. But now you just don't see them, knocking the doors down, because they see the history that you got to assume you're losing money in most cases as a host city.
Yeah, and I don't know how. Do you think they'd ever go away? The Olympics, with just financially, people are just we just can't financially unless multiple cities host it.
Well, I've heard that before, or have just one. One Summer Games host and one Winter Games host. Forever. I've heard that actually thrown out. I'm not saying that's my opinion, but I've heard
put it back in Athens and
right, summer. Is it in Athens? Then the venues are going to be used every few years, then pick a winter sport. Or like you said, I've heard that too, is cycle it within a small group of cities. 3, 4, 5 winter cities,
almost like a golf rotation for the majors.
That's right.
I think putting it all in one would be difficult, because it is cool to see the culture every time you go, because really for a month you really celebrate that country, which is neat. Like when Brazil had it, there was so much stuff around it, just on the news and everything else. And it was you get immersed in that country a little bit, even though you don't live there, but you watch it nonstop.
Well, I've been on a bit of I'm a travel freak. I love to travel, and so I didn't realize I was doing this. But a couple summers ago on a trip in Europe, I was with my wife, and I realized I started to count how many Olympic cities I've actually visited. And like I said, it wasn't even my goal, but I have to actually sit down, because I think it might be 20.
And
it's a lot
of past and future, or past and
just
current,
past.
or whatever.
Yeah. Past, current, winter, summer.
So it's not necessarily you were there for, but Placid would count.
Right, Lake Placid would count, but Albertville, France. I wasn't planning. I was on a vacation for a week in France, over by the Alps in Chamonix. And we're driving and just stopped in Albertville for lunch. Driving.
What was that Olympics?
92 maybe.
Oh, really? Oh, so
I don't know. No, I just threw that off the top of my head. I don't actually know that, but it might be. I don't know. But yeah, so weird cities like that have hosted, and I just I've actually been Innsbruck. I was in Innsbruck a couple times with bobsled. I'm like, wait, Innsbruck hosted the Olympics.
That Germany?
Austria. Yeah, right on the border, kind of. Anyway, I had Olympic in my blood, I guess.
So, and you were part of, and I think I remember this because they were pretty big during the Winter Olympics. With it, Night Train was the name of the bobsled. Was that the guys you worked with?
Yeah.
Because don't you have a picture in your office with them all signed?
I got a couple of them, yeah.
So that was a crew that you worked with exclusively for the most part?
Well, no. So typically, it started a little different, but for the last, just guessing, 10, 12 years, basically bobsled and skeleton. So skeleton are the people that slide on their bellies head first. Luge go on their back, feet first, for those of you that don't know. But bobsled and skeleton started traveling together, basically. So you'd have men's and women's skeleton, which are small teams. It might just be, 3 to 5 men and women each. And then bobsled. Now the bobsled team, particularly for the men, are pretty good size, because USA has always been, not always, but the last 15, 20 years been fairly competitive. So they have at least 2, if not 3 sleds for men. That's 2-man teams. And then 4-man teams, another at least 2 4-man teams. Now, obviously, some of those athletes do both. But I would say just bobsled men and women, they were probably traveling 20 to 25 athletes. And then you throw another 7 to 10 skeleton athletes. It's 30-ish athletes for one provider on the road. It's busy. And these are big men and women.
You were the chiropractor for all of them.
That's it, for however many weeks I was with them.
Gotcha.
And so it was always volunteer. You had to be asked, but they would pay my flight, they would pay my lodging and everything, but basically I was working for free. And that's part of the reason, after years of doing that for a few weeks every winter, it just got to be, I saw all the places I wanted to see. I did a couple of world championships. And then when I started traveling teaching continuing ed like I've been doing the last 6-7 years, it just got hard to justify. Kids were getting older, leaving for free, basically, closing my office, not making money for 2 or 3 weeks, plus being away from the family. Additionally, when I could actually just travel and teach a class and actually get paid. So it just got tougher to justify. And that's when I started getting a little more into, I've just recently started covering very little, but a few track and field events. I worked the Penn Relays a couple of years ago. I was supposed to work an international event this summer that obviously got canceled. So
what's the Penn Relay?
Penn Relays, I want to say the oldest relay in the U.S., if not,
is
one
that
of the
like
older
Penn
ones.
University? Or
it is,
okay.
Down in Philadelphia.
Okay.
So it's been going on 100+ years. The cool thing with the Penn Relays is it's everything from high school athletes all the way to international professionals. So like earlier on in the week, that's like the meet you want to qualify for as a high school relay team.
Okay.
So they have these 4x4, 4x1 boys and girls relays teams from all over the country come out, and the stadium is just this massive 2-tiered stadium. It's unlike anything most high school kids would see, and you're just running in front of tens of thousands of people in April in Philly. So that was cool.
Yeah, so actually I was talking to the last guy I was on, which I didn't realize that you guys had a pretty good connection, but it was Chris Berkey.
Yeah,
and
a hurdle connection.
Yeah, so Chris was talking about, they went down to the state championship for, I think it was last year. He had a kid from Saranac who won the, I believe it was the 110-meter hurdle.
Yep, Cam Duffield, yep.
Yeah, so he won that, and then he said that his 110 hurdles, am I saying that? No, 400-meter hurdles
400
he won.
hurdles.
And the 110 hurdles, he ran the 4th fastest time ever and got second place because the kid that ran the fastest broke the record.
That's
Chris
track and field, man.
Yeah, and Chris was just saying, he's like, his state championship run was phenomenal, but he goes, it was his actual 110 run was probably more impressive. It's just he happened to go up against a stud that was just, probably unfortunately just got paired with him. It's kind of like the Phil Mickelson, Tiger Woods, you just get paired with such a good player.
And it's better than it used to be. So I'll play the back in my day type of thing here, but
you're old enough to say that.
When I was 90, 90, 91, 92 track, like I said, I played 3 sports at PHS, but track was definitely kind of my thing. But back then we didn't have Division I and Division II states like they do now. So now it's split. Basically, the big schools are Division I at states. They compete against each other, and then Division II are all the schools. Like basically all the schools around here are considered Division II. They're small. They're small schools, and so they have their basically 2 separate state championships. You're only competing against your division. We didn't have that. We competed against everybody in one state. So for a Section 7 athlete back in the 80s or 90s to like place in the top 6 was unheard of. It was super, super rare because like I said, so I did my last 2 years, I ended up doing pentathlon, which is half a decathlon. That's what they do at high school. So it's
gotcha. 5 inches.
Yeah. So it's you think I'd remember that? 110 hurdles, long jump, shot put, high jump, and then the 1,500-meter run. So just short of a mile. You did that over 2 days.
Okay.
At the high school level, and it was just kind of my wheelhouse. I wasn't awesome, but I was pretty good at a lot of different things, which made me good at that event. So, excuse me. Long story short, I look back. I was lucky enough to get 6th my junior year and then 4th my senior year. 2 of the 3 kids that beat me my senior year were Shenendehowa kids. Now, Shenendehowa, if you're not familiar, in Clifton Park, I think is like 14,000 kids, K through 12.
Huge.
It's a massive like 5A school. My sister's actually a coach there and a teacher. So I was like, it's like it would have been nice to have the small school, big school, and I would have actually had a chance to compete at the top of the top.
Yeah.
But it made it that much more special too because it was so uncommon. There weren't many of us that were able to do well, so it was nice.
Yeah, the track and field. I mean, the only thing I have is soccer. We went to Shazy, so really all we have is soccer. We have track and field, but when you go to like the state championship level, at least we play in classification, so we were always the smallest school. We were the Class D, and I remember my junior year, we're really good. We won. Now, I came in the tail end of this time period, but our team won the 2004 state championship, went undefeated in 2005, We're undefeated in 2006 until we got upset by E-Town in the finals.
Yep.
And up to that point, I think we had like a 55-game win streak, which was, I think to this day,
that.
I think it's like it's pretty high in the state, either number 2 in the state, I think lifetime, but we were ranked, I think in the top 15 in the region as a D school, which was pretty incredible. And same thing when you go to states and you do, which is weird because the girls, when they go to states, they always do first and second team of each classification.
Yes.
So we always had like a lot of girls get on the
Yep.
one or two. For the guys, they just did.
Yeah.
I think it was small school, large school is what they classified it. So you're talking B, C, and D.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing. When we got a couple of the guys that we played with that got on first team All State, you were All State of B, C, and D, which not a lot of people. Every year we usually get one guy on, maybe two if we had a really good team, but it's tough.
Yeah, it's interesting argument, and seeing, so fast forward to present day again. In my office, I treat a lot. It's kind of my expertise. I treat a ton of like middle school, high school athletes, boys, girls, whatever, sports, all this stuff, and it's just an interesting generational. And I know I come across sounding like the back in my day guy, but it's track and field is interesting because it's fairly objective. You can kind of go back 30 years and get a pretty similar assessment because you've got times, you've got distances, you've got, whatever. And if anything, you'd argue the further you go back, the bigger the disadvantage. It's funny. I joke, my son's now going in, just finished 10th grade at Plattsburgh High and as a runner as well. And I joke with him. I said, you'd think I was like 80 years old, but my junior, senior year at PHS, I want to say almost half the tracks I ran on were cinder.
Wow.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
Peru was still a cinder track in like 1991.
And cinder
92.
being like that dusty.
Yeah. That's
like,
just slow.
Yeah.
So a sable was like running at the Plattsburgh City Beach. It was like soft cinder, where you'd not only have to hurdle, you'd have to watch where you landed so you didn't break an ankle in a pit that was carved from the previous guy. And it's interesting because, and none of us weight trained back then. I never lifted a weight in high school. No one did. And so it's weird and almost sad that if you look at some of the all-time records, section records, and also just, I know the PHS record just because, having kids that go there, they have the record board. And it's just crazy when you look back with all the better tracks, the better knowledge we have, nutrition, strength, and everything. Why 75% of the still school records at PHS are pre-1999.
That's crazy.
It is crazy, and it's a too wide a gap to say it was just a few freak athletes that broke all the records. There were a couple of those, but it's just there's a couple of outliers. There was a few years ago. Then you said like Cam Duffield last year for Saranac was just a freak of freak. He was fantastic.
Is he running college now?
Yes, I believe he signed at Albany. I think he's down at Albany.
Yes, Fergie said that. Yeah.
But yeah, it's an interesting thought, doing what I do, treating injured kids, trying to get kids excited about exercise and nutrition and eating right. And even with my own kids, as active as they are, it's an uphill battle. And it just it begs the question, why?
Yeah.
I know part of it is most sports is just seeing a pretty steady decline just in general participation. The numbers aren't there, which obviously makes it harder to break records. But and there's not one answer. It's multifactorial because everybody's quick to blame the video games. Are they less active? And maybe that's a part of it too. I just don't know. You just don't see the depth of athletics that you did a generation or two ago.
Well, that's why I've been to Plattsburgh State, and they have the same thing. They have the board up there, and Verkey's up there still a bunch of times. And there's a couple that have been broken recently. There's a couple when I went to school that were broken. There's a few other people I know locally that ran. You see their records up there, which is kind of cool. But I think from a sports perspective, and I kind of look at this as, and again, I played a lot of golf when I was a kid. I remember I look at, and this was a couple years back, I was looking at scores in the paper for golf, and they compared to 10 years ago or 15 years ago were not very good, meaning, you might have one or two kids that could break 45 on a 6-man roster. Well, back in the day, like your 5th and 6th guy were shooting in the low 40s.
Really?
And that's
with less technology, worse clubs.
Yeah, you're talking 10, 15 years. Like I remember going out and playing, and like I would look at my scores and I'd look at the kids and be like, and I was a pretty good golfer. Like I could shoot in the 30s and, right around 40. And I would have probably been anywhere from a 1, 2, or 3 on most teams. And then now I look at it like I would be clear 1 back in the day. Not anymore. I don't play as much. But back in the day, it would be clear 1. So I think part of it is there's more things now taking kids' attention away from sports.
Fair enough.
And it could be, like I said, it could be video games, could just be a million other things. Like that's something I look at now. It's like how, now one of it is I'm also in adulthood with kids, but I just feel like there's so much stuff going on all time, especially with kids being in like clubs and extracurriculars. There's not, when I was in when I went to school, you played sports and that was it. I wasn't doing karate. I wasn't doing, travel stuff. I wasn't doing all these extracurriculars. I was doing like soccer, basketball, baseball, and in the summer I played golf or baseball.
It's a good point. And I mean, along the same lines, probably the last thing I'll say on this is the biggest thing I see, and again, I would put just knowing my kids' friends a little bit now and seeing them, and my kids are 16 and almost 15 now, and they're definitely more active than I think the average 16-year-old would be nowadays. But growing up, the thing that's alarming to me, and again, I don't want to say it's everyone, but just as a kind of generalization, is a real lack of free play with kids.
Yeah.
And again, you could argue it's more distractions. We weren't fighting, over 18 different gaming systems and the computers and the phones and all that, granted, but it just seems like, what did you do if you had an afternoon off? You were playing 3-on-3 dunk ball at somebody's house on the 8-foot hoop. You were making up a game of wiffle ball somewhere. Mm-hmm. And I am just a firm believer that it's that from 4, 5, 6 years old that make the well-rounded super stud athletes as juniors and seniors in high school. Yeah. I am on that, and I've worked with enough phys ed teachers in the area and seen their frustration at kid after kid just doing anything to get out of participating in phys ed. Fake notes from parents, sometimes frighteningly enough, real notes from parents for non-real reasons, just because Bobby doesn't want to break a sweat for some reason.
Yeah.
And then you compare it to me in my 40s, and me and my friends were begging study halls, could we go down and sit in on gym?
Yeah.
Just to get an extra gym class in, because they're playing handball or dodgeball or something. I'm like, that's awesome. Let's go down. And so I don't know. I think that's at the heart of it. I really do. That just a lack of the free play.
So I agree 100%. So I obviously I played up until I graduated, and then I started coaching a couple years later. And I was helping Rob out at Shazy, and then I went and started doing JV, and I coached, I think, like head coach JV for like 6 years in soccer. So it was great. I had a blast. I wish I could still coach, but what happened was I could progressively see over that roughly 8 to 10 year stretch that I was at a high school when I stopped coaching, that two things happened. The knowledge base of the kids went down, meaning understanding the sport went down. And number two is we had a lot of specialty soccer players where if I was to give them a basketball or a hockey stick or something, they could not do it. And like you said, they get so specific at one sport that when you cause them to cross-train in another sport, they can't do it.
No.
And one of the things that I grew up with, I was like on a Shazy sports team, I played. Like, I mean, I was on the team, but I would play. I wouldn't sit the bench, but I wouldn't be the star athlete. I was kind of in that middle of the road, but that was every single sport. So I was just kind of steady at all of them. But same thing, if you said, hey, Gaelan, go play tennis right now, I would be coordinated enough to do okay at it. Kids nowadays aren't. They're good with their feet. They can't shoot. They can't dribble. We kind of joke walk and chew gum at the same time is hard. But the other thing is some of the kids that I coached, way better skilled than I ever was in soccer, don't understand the game. And and again, I don't want to, like you said, like back in my day, but I remember kids that I played with, there were some very smart kids on the field that have gone on to coach and have gone on to do other things. And I get some kids, the smallest little thing that you think they would have by the time they're junior high, they just want to get it. And I'm like, guys, this is like basic 101. But what they lack, like you said, if we were at a friend's house for a party, well, we're throwing 2 shoes down and 2 shoes down. We're playing 3v3 or 4v4 soccer in the backyard, which to me is where you get the creativity of moving without the ball and shielding someone off. You got 2 guys to pass to.
Well, yeah. Now
you don't play it anymore.
No, and you've opened up a can of, I mean, I could do a 4-hour podcast on this topic. It's a point of passion of mine, but it's really, and it's not my opinion, most orthopedists, most sports science, biomechanist people that make a living on watching people move and watching how people get hurt and how they perform are in complete agreement. And probably the worst thing to ever happen to kids now is the early sports specialization.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, it was basically hockey in a lot of ways. Hockey's always a little bit of an outlier of a sport. They skate young, they could skate year round, and this and that, and they were always a little bit of the different Now it's almost every sport. I mean, you got AAU with basketball. You've got, soccer was probably the next one after hockey to come on, 15, 20 years ago, where they're playing soccer year round. And I forget who I heard it from, but, a national level kind of soccer sports science guy at a sports med seminar I was at years ago. He said, what we've now done is made really good, skilled soccer players. And unfortunately, we don't have any athletes.
Yeah.
And even I've had this conversation with parents of kids in my office where, with this, a kid at 8 or 9 years old, and I get these arguments from parents that, well, if Bobby or Sally doesn't play soccer year round now, they're going to be left back. You know what I mean? It's almost this pressure, this catch-22, when in reality, my argument is, if he's or she's going to be an elite soccer player, they could probably go the next 4 years and never touch a soccer ball and come back to it, and they'll be getting Division I. You know what I mean? It's just the athletes are groomed, but they're ultimately born in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And either you're going to make it or you're not. And most of these kids, at the very minimal, playing multiple sports a year would be better at injury prevention. They'd be less likely to get hurt. Yeah. And in most cases, you'd argue over the long term, they're going to be better at whatever they end up doing if they play. And in fact, it's such a, I don't know, it's most of the experts in the world are in agreement that at the earliest, no matter how much the kid begs, but the absolute earliest you should consider specializing year-round in a sport is in your mid-teens. Yeah, 14, 15 would be the earliest. Until then, get them as playing as many different sports as they can, and just see where it shakes out.
I didn't even think about the injury part, but again, playing different sports, using different muscle groups, using different biomechanics. Like, I was just thinking that I never got injured ever. I never missed a game because of injury, but I'm thinking about all the kids that I played with. Very rarely do we have kids miss games because of injury, where I know what you're talking about. If you have one kid that specializes in basketball, and they all of a sudden change, their hips or feet or whatever only go one way or the other. Because I know we had a lot of girls, too, that played just soccer back when I played, and a lot of them got injured. And that was the only sport they played, because they weren't 2-3 sport athletes.
No, and that's probably.
But I know hips are different on girls, and
right, it is, and knees. But in soccer is probably one of the better ones. In basketball, to play year round, just because it's so variable, meaning you're running different, changing directions, you're jumping, you're sprinting, you're jogging, you're everything in between, as opposed to the ones I really see getting hammered around here. And again, I am a track and field freak. I love the sport. I think when they introduced indoor track and field up here in the North Country was probably the most damaging thing you could have done from an injury perspective and from a mental burnout factor for a lot of local runners. Because now, especially the distance runners, because now you see them running cross country for a few months in the fall. They go right into little to no break. They're now running distances on really subpar tracks up here in upstate New York, indoor tracks.
Is it just Fieldhouse? Is that the only place they run?
They run at the Fieldhouse almost every week. It's a sectional meet every year. That's a 160-meter, really old track, not ideal. And then they go right into running, your mile, 2 miles outdoors. And I just see this influx toward the end of every season and building throughout, at the end of indoor and in the beginning of outdoor, of all these overuse injuries, and especially distance running. That's the opposite of soccer in a lot of ways. So linear, so easy to develop these repetitive stress, the stress fractures and everything else. I just think, again, long-term development, I think they would be better off just doing something else for the 2 or 3 months in the winter. Maybe run on their own, but not at a competitive level, and kind of have a chance to build some weaknesses, add a little strength training in, play basketball, do something.
Are the kids doing more strength training now, or is that still kind of taboo for them?
No, no, not taboo, but I wouldn't go as far either to say that a lot of them are doing strength training. It's getting better.
It's more on probably the kid taking like the kid taking an initiative to go like at home or go to the gym by himself and do it. Yeah,
it's that's become kind of my niche is runners. Yeah, that's what I've kind of known for in the community is just overuse injuries, running in particular, triathletes. Anybody that's kind of running a lot. And it's just a pet peeve that it doesn't take much. 1 or 2 sessions a week of some good strength training. It's not my opinion. I mean, the studies are just overwhelmingly that not only does it reduce injury, and this is the hard sell with some of the runners, not only does it reduce injury, but strength training, getting stronger, improves distance running performance. We've known that with sprinting forever. You see some of the physiques of these elite sprinters, but it's distance running. It improves running economy. It improves time to fatigue. It improves performance. And again, you don't have to be a meathead. and be hammering weights 4 or 5 days a week. Literally 1 or 2 sessions a week has been shown to improve distance running performance.
Well, one of the, again, back to the soccer, for all the success we've ever had at Shazy, and this is stuff, we talked about when I was coaching, trying to get kids to go to the gym. Because one, we never did that when I was in school. Right. And then it was kind of, again, as technology improved and you started to be more aware of different, technology, but, philosophies or whatever that work, then it was like, okay, we got to start doing strength training. The problem is to get a kid to go in, they want to play soccer, they want to strength train. So that's always the hard sell on kids. It's right. Because I'm thinking about how many teams we would have had that would have been so much better had each kid put on 10 to 15 pounds of muscle right. at an age where they're basically like weeds. They grow like crazy, and if you want to put weight on, you can.
It is, and that's the whole point. That's what the off season's for. Mm-hmm. And this is the problem. There is no off season anymore.
Yeah, you're right.
You can't say all season is important. You just can't do it. Is it travel in the spring and summer? Is it the fall during? Is the thing? Is it your club team? It can't all be equal.
Yeah.
And that's what everyone's trying to do. Is it's all important, and it can't be all important year after year, or you will get injured or burned out. At the best case, you get these kids that perform unbelievably. Especially you see again running, just because it's so easy to get burned out with the running physically and mentally. Mm-hmm. And you see, I can't tell you how many of these kids end up going, very high Division III or some cases Division I, and they never finish. They've dropped out of running by their freshman, sophomore year of college. Yeah. They've had it.
Well, I think, and I've seen some kids go, and it's rare because you see a lot of kids that do well, but then I think when they go to college, you got to treat it as a job at that point. So really, your passion for the sport has to be beyond just I'm good at it. Yeah. And I think because I played with some kids in soccer, and a lot of them didn't go all 4 years of soccer. Right. They're very good players, but I think part of it was either I didn't like the kids I was playing with, I didn't like the idea that it was now felt like a job, yeah. or it was like, hey, I played so many years of soccer and I'm in college, I just want to check out and just hang out with friends and relax. So
yeah, it's interesting. We got to make we need to make some changes just philosophically, I think.
So what do they do? I mean, granted, if you're talking like track and field, when you talk about like the Olympic trials and kids trying to work for the Olympics, because you're talking a sport now. I know they have nationals and they have worlds. Are those yearly or are those every couple years?
At the international level, you mean, like so there's.
Or I should say, domestic and international, like national. They have the U.S. championships, right? Or the
yes, they have national championships every year.
Okay.
There's world championships every 2 years, I think.
And the Olympics every 4.
And then the Olympics every 4, and then they have their typical World Cup. In track and field, it's Diamond League, where it's basically like like a NASCAR race where you're going from city to city. Over the course of the summer,
gotcha.
Competing.
So like a circuit almost.
Exactly.
And now for the Olympic trials, is that a totally separate thing? That's just for the Olympics? Like that's on top of the nationals, or do they use?
That's
am I saying it right? Nationals, or is it?
Yeah.
National championships.
USA championships.
So that would be used as the time trials or the Olympic trials for the Olympics, or is that totally separate?
No,
race?
so they call them separate. The Olympic trials is a definite separate race. Okay. The year of the Olympics,
and they don't stop any of the other races. They just keep, they're still...
No, so you'd have your regular World Cup circuit. It might be cut a little short. Or they may, not every country may have their Olympic trials at the same time. So it might just be that the USA athletes cut their World Cup season a little short to focus and taper for the... So for the easiest way to put it is, so we were supposed to have the Tokyo Olympics this fall, September or July. Either way, this summer, July, I think. So the U.S. Marathon Olympic trials... were in Atlanta in February, right before the whole world kind of fell apart.
Okay.
And it was the biggest group, men and women. I think we're close to 700 or 800 people that had time qualified. So it was this huge race, very difficult course, super windy, cool day. And it was straight up for the first time ever, top 3 go to the Olympics. We, believe it or not, with a country as strong as we are athletically, historically, we had never been deemed good enough in a way where we could get top 3 automatically get to go to the Olympics. It's always been if you qualify on time only. So this was the first trials where, hey, you get in top 3 no matter how fast or slow you run, you're going to the Olympics. And so we got our 3, and then they, obviously canceled the Olympics.
Is that a new way to do it? Or
they've always done the race. It's just no one was ever guaranteed that they would go. Even if they won, if they didn't win with a fast enough time, Even though they were
Okay.
U.S. champ at the Olympic trials, it didn't necessarily guarantee them.
So why the switch?
I'm not sure. I didn't read in on
Was
it
it just
but
to get the participants, I guess?
well, it's more politicking, I think, with the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, to give the U.S. that status of like the gold sticker, saying, yeah, you're competent. You know, you've got a deep enough field and enough good athletes running the marathon for USA that we're going to give you this golden sticker where top 3 go.
Does Gaelan Rupp still run?
Yeah, though he's had some injury trouble.
Because I just remember Gaelan, but he was a good runner at Oregon.
But interestingly enough, 2 local kids ran in the race this year.
Really?
The Olympic trials, 2 Peru kids.
Wow.
That graduated from Peru High School.
Oh, so they're young kids then.
Well, no. So these guys are graduated now, so running kind of semi-professionally. But both, 2 kids from Peru both ran in that race.
Way younger?
Mid-20s.
Oh, wow. Good for them.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, so that was kind of neat to see. But, yeah.
Now, what about the guy that ran the sub 2 hour marathon? Did you watch that race?
I did.
Watch highlights of it?
Yeah, I watch all this stuff. And
Yeah.
I get that up. It's a freak event. You know, the guy. It's a crazy number when you think about it. You know, the argument against for people in that field that it's not. It's a record with an asterisk.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't done in an open competition. It was basically Nike had just done years of research and figured out the right circuit course that was perfectly flat in the right humidity with the right cool temperatures.
Was there a tailwind?
No. It was basically a loop circuit in Italy. I forget.
Okay.
It was only 7 or 8 kilometers, like 4 mile or whatever.
Oh, so we kept just rerunning the same
Over
track.
and over and over. It was
Oh,
city streets. It was on the road.
Yeah.
But it was perfectly flat. They picked a spot in Italy, the time of day, the time of year when the humidity was right and the temperatures were perfect. But more so, he was basically surrounded
By pacers.
by world-class Nike distance runners, and their Nike engineers had figured out this kind of flying wedge. If you remember from like football kick returns,
Yep.
They basically, their biomechanists and engineers figured out the best way to create the most advantage from a draft would
Yep.
be to put this runner in the middle of this wedge of runners. And every 5 kilometers, these pacers were subbing out like a Indy 500 pit crew. They wouldn't even stop. They would these new guys would come on fresh,
Yeah.
and they would follow a car that was projecting laser beams on the ground in the exact dots where every runner had to be.
Oh, my God.
And moving at record pace. So they just had to basically know they were running on that dot, and they were in the perfect formation.
So as long as they had the capacity, they were going to do it. Yeah.
So and then the big controversy was the Nike Vapor shoes, the ones they Vaporfly Plus, I think, or percent, and very controversial. With this carbon shank that Nike was claiming was adding 2 to 4% efficiency, which is a huge amount at that level.
Yeah.
And the IOC deemed them legal. It was just very controversial.
It's kind of like the old swimsuits they used to have for the Olympics.
Well, so that's an interesting point. So, because this question came up,
wasn't that like 2000? That was a big thing in Athens.
Yeah, I forget what year it was, but what track and field has to determine going forward is, do they want to go the way of those old swimsuits, the dimpled suits,
Yep.
or do they want to go the way of the slap skates and speed skating? So if you remember, the suits you were talking about, they were basically golf balls. They were covering almost all the skin.
I think it was the Australian athletes all wore them.
Well, I believe USA
US
did
too?
too, because they legalized USA Swimming or whatever the International Swimming Association legalized them.
Okay.
And then every world record was shattered the first 4 months, and then they shut them down and said they are no longer legal. So these shoes could eventually be kind of deemed that this has gone beyond normal technology advancing, that this structure of the shoe is too much of an unfair advantage mechanically. It's not really a human competition anymore. The other way they could go years and years ago is speed skating. Forever, like when Eric Heiden was skating, they skated on a solid blade that was attached from front to back to the boot of the skate.
Okay.
So, but years ago, they developed something called a slap skate, where as they go to push off and go up on their toes, the back of the skate is on a hinge. So the blade stays in contact with the ice all the way through push off, which is way faster and more efficient. So they developed these brand new skates. They made them legal, and all the world records proceeded to fall. USA Speed Skating basically said, these are legal. This is a technological advancement. It's fair. Everyone has access to the skates.
Yeah.
This is our new normal going forward. So those are the two directions basically USA or IOC has to go with track and field.
So these shoes are new, the ones Nike just made?
In the last year.
Because I was watching it and I didn't realize all the other. I was thinking, okay, this guy's on a flat or downhill course. I didn't realize it was a loop.
No, it's a loop. Yep.
Then I was thinking, okay, there's got to be some kind of tailwind, and then I'm thinking the guys in front of him, obviously from a draft and then a pacing perspective. Now, is this guy like? I don't know enough about distance running. Is this guy like the Tiger Woods of distance running?
Yes.
I mean, this guy's well known as like
Kipchoge
wins everything.
Yes, he's again. I'm off the top of my head, but at the time, I want to say he'd won. And these guys don't typically do small, backwoods town marathons. These guys save themselves for
like
one or
London.
two elite competitive. That's where the prize money is. London, New York, Chicago, Berlin, Boston sometimes. And so I want to say he had either won 8 of the 9 marathons he'd ever entered.
Wow.
And I think he was second in the one he didn't win. So this guy was the best of the best in history. Had like the top 3 or 4 fastest times in history. Had gotten it down to like 2:02:57 or something
by himself.
In a legit race in Berlin. Now, since then, the legit record has come down, and I want to say it's 2 flat high, so just under like 2 hours 1 minute. So who knows? It's a big gap. I mean, to shave a minute or two is a crazy amount of time at that level, because a lot of people. You hear the times, he ran a 2:05, he ran a 2 hour 3 minute, or he ran in Kipchoge's with the Nike plan 1:59. It's insane pace when you break it down. That when the record went 2:02:57, I was the first guy to ever run sub 2:03. I try to when I teach these lectures, when I travel a little bit, I always tell people, I go, who here runs a little bit? Who does their local 5K or the turkey trot or this and that? And, for most of us, like a 20-minute 5K, you're moving right along, man. I mean, that's a pretty good for a regular Joe runner that runs 2, 3, 4 times a week, a 20K. These guys at 2 hours and 3 minute marathon pace are averaging approximately 14 minutes and 40 seconds per 5K
Insane.
for 7+ 5Ks consecutively. So to put in perspective, that's 440-mile pace.
Oh, my God.
For 26 consecutive miles, he's averaging 440. Now, they don't that's not steady. These guys are surging. They'll hammer a 5K in like 14:20 something and then back off a little bit and separate people. They're just averaging a casual 440 mile for 26 miles. Now, a 440 mile would win pretty much every mile boys race in high school CVAC in most races.
Yeah.
And that's 1 mile.
Yeah, that's... I remember running my fastest mile ever was when I was in high school, and again I played soccer, wasn't a runner. I ran just over 6, so it was like low. It was like 6:05 maybe.
Yeah, so
something.
they would have beat you by like a lap and a half in a mile race.
Yeah, and that was their pace, and
that's their average.
That's the thing where I'm like, and at 6 minutes again, I know I wasn't like speeding, but I was like for me that was fast. A very good time for me back in high school. And then I look at it and I'm like, a 440, and it just blows my mind. There's certain like athletic feats that I just like look at. I'm like, that's just incredible, and that's one of them.
It is.
Like,
and even if you're into it and watch the races, the speed doesn't carry over on TV because they're all running that fast. So you'll see a pack of 15 guys or girls, and they're just cruising along, and you just don't realize they're dropping 440 miles.
So Kipchoge.
Kipchoge. Yep.
Kipchoge. So if Kipchoge was to run, now it's obviously a different race. If he was to run a mile, can he improve quite a bit on that, or is he just like muscle structure and twitch fibers and all that? Is
no
he just
idea.
Built for long?
No, I mean he could definitely run faster than a 440.
But do you think? I mean, he's not obviously not competing with a mile runner, but like, could he run from a 440 probably down to like a sub 415? Is that possible?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I just didn't know like how much difference they can have.
I'm just guessing. I'd have to go back and see if he's ever raced one, just a mile or a 2 mile race. But
he could probably run a 4 minute mile if he had to.
probably sub 4. Yeah.
What's the mile time now record?
Oh, geez, you're asking me deep diving here, Gaelan.
Well,
I want to say 3. It's crazy. It might be high 340s, like 347.
Insane.
Yeah,
I remember when
stupid numbers.
Well, you said when like Roger Bannister was the first one to break the 4, but he was doing it on those dirt tracks, you know, which obviously aren't ideal. So right there in technology, but it's impressive when because I've run like a 400, a 400, and for someone to say you ran under a 1 minute 400 is fast, and then you do that 4 times, like
the better way to look at it with the marathon world record, I always tell when I teach, I said because usually I'm on the road, and I'll say if anybody in the room, I said if you guys want to feel what that 2:03 pace for a marathon is, go down to the treadmill in the hotel and put it up to just under 14 miles an hour. It's like 13.8 or 13.9 miles an hour is their average speed for 2 hours. Well, a lot of treadmills don't even go past 12.
Yeah.
They're 12% incline, 12% max. Some go to 15 miles an hour, but that's maxed out. See how you do.
I saw some people on YouTube trying to do it for, I think the test was how fast can you go at that pace.
Yes.
And guys they were checking out after like a minute.
Yeah.
Like if they went a minute, some guys were like, that was incredible that I made a minute at this pace.
Well, you're still at 60. It's a sub 70-second quarter mile.
Yeah.
So you're running like a 68-second lap on the track.
It's a dead sprint
for 100 and something laps. Yeah,
it's insane. So like that's one of the even take away that even a 2:02 marathon blows my mind how fast those people can run.
Yeah.
I mean they train for it, but it's like that. I don't know. It's just like I think the Olympics, because I watch like sports, like you watch football and you watch soccer and you watch all these sports and you're like that's really cool. But then when you actually put it into the Olympic, where you have times,
yes,
you can really judge it. Because like a swimming, going down and back, or the guys that dive in and just do those 50-meter swim in like 29 seconds, you're like, oh, okay, that's like how fast that is. And
or to bring it back to bobsled, that's what makes it so challenging in bobsled, because every track is different. The weather can make it fast or slow. If the ice is warmer or colder, the air temperature is warmer or colder. So there's just too many variables to objectify it. So you really can just go by who's dominating, week after week, who's winning.
Do you ski at all?
Yeah.
Do you like a lot? Do you still actively ski?
Yep.
We watched. You might like this. Now, we watched this the other day on Netflix. It was called like Magnificent or Majestic.
Yeah, I saw that.
Oh, you did watch it?
I think so. I think we're talking about the same thing.
Talking about like the big wave surfers and the skiers.
Yeah, in Portugal and stuff.
Oh my God, we were watching this and the problem was we started fast forwarding a lot of it because there's like the kite skate. And I'm like, okay, that wasn't as cool as the guy that was doing the 90-foot wave.
Yeah.
And you start watching these guys doing 90-foot waves. But I'm thinking that was impressive. And then what was also impressive, you had the one guy that went up to the Alps and went down that face, which I don't know what the steepness of that was, but it was insane.
Yeah.
But then the other guys that basically hiked up and then backcountry skied, but they came down. I'm like, how? That just blows my mind. They're like, we're going to hike 8 hours up, and then you're talking, I don't know, again, like I've been to Whiteface, and those are pretty steep, but I mean, these got to be way steeper than Whiteface.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's
in the Alps.
Yeah, sometimes some of those faces, I think, are approaching, 50 degrees,
That's insane.
60 degrees. Yeah, I mean, it's vertical. It certainly looks vertical.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not anywhere near. I'm a good, solid, I'd say intermediate to advanced. Like I'll ski any mountain, like, groomed.
Yes.
I might take my time. I might have to jump turn my way, but I can pretty much get down just about anything. But I watch all those videos too, and it just makes your stomach turn just watching them.
Yeah.
But that gets into a whole other field beyond just athleticism. It's more of a mental,
there's a little adrenaline craziness there.
Well, probably the ultimate in recent memory is the Free Solo movie. The Alex Honnold.
I got his book. I haven't read it yet. But
Yeah, it's phenomenal. It makes your stomach turn. And it's just an interesting part of that documentary was when they did the functional MRI on his brain, and he had all this basically, no firing of the regions of his brain that should have registered fear. He just is almost dead to it, and you almost have to be to do some of that stuff.
The freaky thing about that movie, besides the fact my hands were sweating the whole time, because I don't know, it's just freaky, but was like when he was just trying to go up fast. He wasn't like I was going to miss it. He goes, and all of a sudden he was like to the point where I think there was one really funny part when they said like, oh, is he at this party yet? I go, yeah, he blew by like 20 minutes ago.
Yeah.
And he was just going, and then there was that one scene where he was stretching.
Yes, reaching for that.
He had to stretch for that wall, but he was practicing stretching because he knew how far he had to actually get his body.
Yeah.
So he was just like working certain, and again, he knew every step on that mountain, and it just blows my mind that, one, I just think that's insane. But then all these guys that are filming it, and it's like, imagine just that day filming it. Like, you got to be like on the edge of your seat.
Well, the guy said in the one, he goes, I don't want to watch my friend fall through the frame.
Yeah.
As kind of, I think that was Jimmy Chin that said that. And I think it's really taking something away from those type of athletes, the whatever adrenaline freak sport things. Because we always grew up hearing it was just, he's got a death wish. That phrase, death wish. And I think that's really undermining, because I'm sure there are some people out there that are just a screw loose. But you just said it, like with Hanold, you cannot tell me, if anything, he's over the top attention to detail, almost like a little on the spectrum.
Yeah,
of, with his sketch pad and every little hold. So you can't say it's a death wish. Now, you and I could say that just because it looks crazy, but I really do think, and I'm no neuroscientist or, psychiatrist or anything, but just as an armchair and athletic performance person, I just think there's something in the brain. And like I said, they touched on it in the on the Free Solo doc, a little bit of this. I think it just takes, it's different levels, whether it's a neurochemical, they need more stimulation than you and I do. To reach that kind of fear level, something in there. But anyway, it's cool anyway. To watch,
and then to go back to that like documentary, the one guy that went on the Portugal water waves, and remember he said he got turned around and they flushed him up on the beach, and he's like, I thought I was going to die, and then he's like,
then I went back out.
And he's like, he does the interview, he's like, I'm going to go back out.
Yeah.
I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah, and that's what I mean.
It's just like these guys are just, and of course I don't have that. I told Gina, like, I can ride a roller coaster, I'm fine. I don't need any adrenaline in my life. Like, I'm good enough. Like, you get certain things that, like, certain things give you adrenaline, but that's not one of them.
Yeah.
And I saw the skiing, and the surfing just blows my mind too. But I was looking at least the surfing. Like, if you were to crash, you at least, I mean, I know it's bad, but you at least kind of hit water, and you get kind of.
Although it depends, man.
But that's what I'm saying. Yeah. It depends if you hit rocks. I know there's danger, but then I'm looking at the guys that are going up in the mountain. Now, granted, it's different because I've skied and I haven't been on a surf. Exactly. But you look at these guys going down a mountain like this, and there's rocks, and they're flying off. And it's like, if you fall, you're falling. Where water, at least if you fall, and I don't get me wrong, people can get crushed by the waves, but it's like you still. You're only 90 feet above, and you have surface above you, and you kind of get brought in. I might be looking at that totally different, where obviously people that surf would be like, you're an idiot. Like, this was way more dangerous. But that adrenaline blows my mind. The size of those waves, and then like the what's it called? The
jet ski
just like tows them and pulls out of the frame.
Well, they're moving too fast to get on themselves. That's the whole point. They need the jet ski because they just, the wave would go right through them basically. Underneath
it's when the wave comes down crashing, they just escape the wave. I mean,
it's crazy. The whole thing is crazy.
I don't. And then people are up there watching it and filming it, and I'm like, you guys are absolutely nuts.
Yeah.
I want to ask you too, like, how this way always, when people get into a business, like you're in obviously chiropractic, you went to chiropractic school, you did all that, and you like the idea of the human body and the movement. How have you found it translate to the business aspect of it? Because again, you're running a small business for, which I think, because I've talked to a couple of people. I had Sam Morris, who's a friend of mine. She does Irish dancing.
Yep.
Same thing. Loved dancing her whole life, and then opens up a dance studio. And then I've known guys that like the gym, and they open up a gym. And then, so one where you go into business, I don't know, I wouldn't really say it's, you like it. I don't know if it's, I guess it would be a hobby now and passion, but did you take that now and then you added the business element? Did you find that was an easy transition? Because you talked about the doctors writing scripts, and maybe they like medicine, but they didn't like all the paperwork.
Right.
Like, I love real estate. I hate sitting down and doing paperwork.
Yeah.
It blows, like, it's just mentally draining, and I'm just, I get tired of it. But have you been able to find the business? You've been doing it for a while now, so I mean, obviously you've gotten comfortable or found a routine. But
it sounds like kind of two questions in one. I think the first one you were starting to ask was, did the schooling, 4 years of post grad, chiropractic school, it did nothing to help me in business.
Yeah,
it was atrocious, and it really. And I've spoken to enough students from different schools over the years, traveling a little and teaching continuing ed courses. I hear the same story, that it really is atrocious, and maybe it's easy to blame the schools. Maybe it is just hard to teach in the little time they have outside of the kind of medical type classes to teach how to be successful in business, marketing and accounting and all these basics. But I was not prepared at all. That was part of the reason I worked for a couple of different doctors for 2 years when I graduated. I just had no clue. Was I ready to start my own thing? How to do it, even if I was ready. So that took me 2 years of kind of research. And even when I started it, I was certainly not ready. My goal, and in hindsight, I was smart enough, I think, I won't even say give myself that much credit. I was probably lucky enough to really have my overwhelming philosophy with business is to keep my overhead as low as possible. It's really easy, especially now compared to 20 years ago, to get caught up in technology with some of these new grads and, just getting big oversized clinic space right in the center of a town and paying huge amounts of rent and technology and decking it out with state-of-the-art this and that. And you just don't need that to get started. And I don't care what your business is in, with probably a few exceptions. What I found out I was good at is treating people and getting them better in as quick a time as possible. A part of it's my own little type A kind of OCD. I hate running behind schedule. It really stresses me out beyond all things, and I probably have gotten more compliments over the years for anything.
Out of any place I've ever been, you are the best at, from a medical professional, staying on time.
Yeah, when I hired Tammy, my office man, my one employee, a couple of year and a half, 2 years ago now, and she used to be amazed because she comes from a little more traditional medical, working at different medical offices. And I used to apologize to patients constantly. I say, "Hey, sorry to keep you waiting." And Tammy goes, "You were only like 4 minutes behind schedule." And I'm like, "Well, you know what? I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't like being kept waiting. I don't double book." And I kind of take pride on that. And like I say, patients really...
That's one of the things I love about you.
Well,
it's just,
And I've kind of dialed it down to this, because when I do these classes on the weekend, I get a certain percentage of students, and they kind of have Googled me by then, while I'm talking, and they're looking, and they say, "Hey, can I talk to you on the break?" I'm like, "Sure, come on up." And they'll say, what's your secret? You've been at it now for a while. You've kind of opened and sold a couple different offices over the years and this and that. And I said, you're not going to like my answer. I said, you've got to be good. You've got to be decent practitioner. You can't be just an idiot, to lack of a better word. You have to have decent hands, but you don't have to be the best either. You just have to be good enough to provide services and get people better, number one. But I said, other than that, you want a successful business, run on time, and don't be a
jerk.
Yes, a jerk would be the nice way.
I
usually use a different word.
You can swear on this podcast.
Right.
You're fine.
I was gonna say, usually I say run on time and don't be an a-hole.
Yeah,
that's my success. All these business people will come to me. What are you talking about, John? I'm like, that's it. I have never once in 20 years of practice I have ever run an advertisement. And I basically have been lucky enough to build up a waiting list practice where I'm full. Every day is full. Knock on wood. Obviously, things have been a little different the last 3 months, but up till now, things are just full, and it's all on word of mouth. And it's not that I'm doing anything spectacular, but again, I run on time. I treat people with respect. I treat them like a human. I speak to them with respect. Don't talk down to them. And it's a pretty simple model. But back to your question was, no, none of that came easy. It was all just, trial and error. But again, if you keep your overhead low, that's more money in my pocket every month. So it takes a lot of pressure off to doing things maybe that other providers that were a little more desperate for income and revenue would do, things that maybe were a little shady from a marketing perspective, or maybe like, well, maybe I can get them coming back
kind of
2 more visits and a little,
thing.
And it just, if you can keep the overhead off and say, hey, I only really need to see 30 patients in a week to cover my overhead. Anything over that's just kind of money in my pocket. That takes I just made that number up, but whatever it is, that takes a lot of pressure off of getting sucked into kind of dark places that where you question, you start looking back after, if you're saying, well, this isn't me, why am I doing this?
Like I've been to a couple chiros before, and again, this is 6 years, I think now. And that was one of the things, well, actually Gina referred me to you, and this is before I was with Gina at the time. So it's just a girl I knew, and Gina being my wife now, she said the same thing. She goes, John's great, knows his stuff, and he'll get you in on time. Yeah. Meaning basically what you said. And the two things I think you do a great job of is on time, which I'm a huge proponent of, because my schedule is like crazy throughout the day. So when I know I have to just block out 20 to 30 minutes and I'm in and out within that 20 to 30 minutes, I can set an appointment
Yeah.
I literally leave your office and I go to an appointment 15 minutes later.
Yeah.
And I never worry about, hey, I'm going to be late.
No.
And so then also, like you said, not talking down, meaning I consider myself, I guess, from a body human performance level, like a little bit better than the average person.
You are.
By no means, like, I didn't go to med school or anything, so I have no clue on like the actual term, more like a layman's terms guy.
Yeah.
But you speak to me in layman's terms. So when you say something, it's like, okay, I understand exactly what you're saying. You could use all these fancy lingos on the chin tuck. You're just like, hey, just tuck your chin back.
Yeah.
You don't have to tell me all of it. And I just want to know, what do I have to do? Tuck your chin back and it works? Perfect. I don't need to know what muscles. I don't need to know all the details. But like you talked about, I've been doing real estate for 10 years. When I first got in, talked about fancy, I was at my parents' kitchen table doing real estate. And I would say I'm still pretty low key. This is my sister's old table, like in where she used to have her apartment or in college. That desk is one of the agents was her old desk, gave it to me. I can barely fit stuff on it. Like I'm very low key when it comes to, like I spend money on like stuff that I need that like helps my job, not necessarily the comfort stuff.
Right.
But from a real estate perspective, I would tie it into, like you said, working on people and really knowing what you're doing. Like, yes, I understand the market and everything else, but then how do people like using you?
Right.
I'm consistent with following up, which for you is being on time, meaning I'll call people. I'm very organized when it comes to my day to day with talking to people. And then number two is I'm just nice to people. Like I don't pressure people to buy. I'm just like, hey, you like the house or not? I don't. Great. Find another home. Oh, you like it? Cool. Let's make an offer. And I think that like laid back approach but laid back from a personality standpoint. And then like you said, type A, meaning on time, on schedule. Like I live by my calendar. And not missing appointments, not moving, not canceling on people. I think that goes a long ways also. And it doesn't make me better. I'm not more skilled than other people. I'm more organized than a lot of people.
Yes.
And I'm more diligent about keeping on track. But I think just by doing those, to me, that's like human 101, where you just translate it into your business. And then it's funny how that works. And it makes you do well. But
especially in a smaller town. And just to step back a little bit, what you said, the biggest issue with, and it's a personal kind of, battle's a strong word, but a personal, strong held opinion of mine. The chiropractic profession is a tough one sometimes because we almost eat our own young too much. We go back when I was in school 20 years ago. All you ever heard about was this battle between chiropractic and medical doctors, chiros and MDs, and we're going kind of head to head and talking, MDs were kind of shooting down the profession, sometimes for good reasons, sometimes for completely wrong reasons. Mm-hmm. But the last 10 or 12 years, I have more issues within my own profession about difference in philosophies and some of the stuff I hear being done by chiropractors and just what they're doing and what they're making their patients do. And even in this town, I'm not saying bad-mouthing anything. It's just a completely different philosophy of how to practice. A lot of docs in this area are a little more, I'd call, old school kind of chiropractic, traditional-based chiropractic, where the adjustment is everything. Crick, crack, you're out the door, and I'm not joking, sometimes 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and this real pressure that if you're not getting adjusted every week or two, this is going to happen to you or that's going to happen to you. You're going to degenerate. You're going to none of that has a stitch of research behind it. It's just none of it. Now, I treat a lot of people, yourself included, quote unquote maintenance care. I have tons of athletes that they just like every few weeks, they pop in, get their hips worked out, do a little soft tissue work, get an adjustment. Just when you're logging 80, 90 mile weeks, stuff gets stiff, stuff gets locked up. But never once have I ever pressured a patient to come back. I want them to come back, but my goal is, and it's funny, like it's a stupid business model when you think about it. I want to get someone better in as few as visits as possible. That's it. And if you look at my average for simple cases that come in, I threw my back out lifting something out of the trunk, or I hurt my back lifting the baby out of the crib, or my my knee bugged me after I did a stupid long run, longer than I should have, is typically 2 to 5 visits. I want to see them better and free to go within. I always tell people, you give me 3 to 6 treatments. First visit, I say, you give me 3 to 6 treatments, you're either going to be better or you're not. And if you're not better in 5-6 visits, well, we're going to get you somewhere else. This isn't working. If what I'm going to do is going to work, it's going to work in 2 or 3 or 4 visits, 96% of the time, period. And so that's why I think part of the problem is a lot of times new patients come in, that have been other chiropractors, and I end up spending more of the visit kind of de-educating them from what they may have heard to what the research and kind of recent research kind of shows, and say, hey, no. You don't need to always come in here and see me. I'm always here if you need me. But here's what you need to do, and kind of try to put it into the patient's hand to self-care for most of the stuff.
Yeah.
So that you don't need every time you say, well, I did something stupid. I shouldn't have been weeding for 9 straight hours the first nice day of the year, and now I'm a little stiff in the back. Well, hey, I remember John told me, let me try this and this for a day or two and see if it works itself out. If it doesn't, give me a call.
Yeah.
But it's just, it's frustrating sometimes.
Well, when I was a kid, I used to go to the chiro with my dad, like maybe once a month. I was little, so I don't remember how frequent it was, but then I got away from it for years, and I didn't come back to it until first thing was migraines.
Yes.
So I had migraines. So I went to a place. Migraines were fine.
Yeah.
This wasn't you. It was other place. It was fine. Like whatever. Two things I didn't like was I had to wait. And it was like triple booked, and you got in, and it was like 3 days a week. And I'm like, I don't have time to go 3 days a week.
Right.
So whatever. We did that. Then it came back. Then I had my shoulder issue, and I told Gina, and she goes, "Go see John." And then I think I told you about migraines. So I used to get migraines. I'd say a few times a year, and I remember the first time I went in, you just did like basically one treatment, and I was like, "Do I have to come back in a couple?" Because I didn't know what to do. I was like, "Do I come back in a couple?" No, you're like, "No, I'll see you in a couple weeks." I'm like,
"Yeah,
okay, that's." Then I didn't know the difference, and then, but it was again, you were actively treating it more than just like going in and just cracking my neck and then seeing you. It was like I would say I probably spend a solid 10 minutes with you at least.
Yeah, now with the massage stuff we've got with Wayne,
maybe a little bit longer with him, but it's usually you go in and it's a treatment. It's not like you just go in and you're like, hey, Gaelan, crack, see ya.
No, but I also don't. I kind of pride myself. I'm not putting you on 15 different machines that have questionable effectiveness. Like the stem. There's time and a place occasionally for those, but research really is pointing toward aggressive and not bad aggressive, but just manual medicine. Find what's tight, loosen it up, give you 2 or 3 recommendations to try to keep it loose or to strengthen it. Boom, done. And the problem with that quick rack 'em, crack 'em kind of historical, what a lot of people think of chiro, just go in, crick, 2 minutes, crick, crack, done, is, in my opinion, you're missing at least half the problem. If you're not at least addressing what the muscles are doing, what the fascia, the connective tissue and stuff is doing, you can adjust. And that's, I think, why with a lot of those type of practitioners, people feel like they need to go back 3 times a week, 2 times a week, because they're only getting part of the problem every time you go in.
Yeah.
And so that's always been my philosophy. Now, I can't see people, and I wouldn't want to see people in 2 or 3 minutes. I see people my return visit appointments are 20 minutes. That's what they're scheduled for. And so, I'm going to see you for, if it's a simple case, maybe it's just 10 or 12 or 13 minutes. Other times maybe it's 20. Right.
Yeah. I just go in and to be honest, just get a little and the biggest thing that you do besides I like the hip thing, and then a lot of it's just working on my neck.
The muscles. Yeah.
And again, my wife is a massage therapist, but it's kind of one where people think you get massages all the time. You don't, because partly it's me. I don't actually really pressure her, and then 2, which is fair. I mean, I have lacrosse balls. we have a lot of like stuff around the house. Yeah. Like she has the blade. She has all those things which I don't use. I've used the blades before on like little small things, that I can reach, but foam roller, lacrosse ball, a lot of those things. I have kind of like those hip circle things. A lot of times I use just to warm up, and a lot of that to me is I do a lot of self-maintenance prior to asking her. Like if I have her do something, it's because everything I've done is kind of, I take a fair stab at it first. Usually that's when I go in and see you. Like if I have something that's really bothering me, I'm usually on a lacrosse ball or a foam roller working on it. And then it's kind of like, okay, it needs a little bit more attention. Or, granted, I'm not saying to do it every single day. And but it's like for right now, I know I have like what's that little? It's like a 3-letter acronym kind of thing.
Oh, the TFL.
Yes,
tensor fascia lata.
So that TFL is one where my hip starts hurting, which typically goes down my IT band. And 90% of the time it's just taking, I can already feel it like right now, just putting my hand there. If I put a lacrosse ball there and just let it kind of sit in and work its way into that, it loosens up. And then eventually my IT band kind of just relaxes. And
it's all the same band of connective tissue.
But that's where I would hit it, right?
That's right.
So
it's one of the top 3 most common things I see. And the reason is sitting.
Yeah.
We just sit too much. All of us. I mean, even if you're an active person, going out and, going for a run for an hour, 3 or 4 days a week does not undo the frightening number of hours most of us, even active people, sit a day. Yeah. And when you sit, the fronts of those hips are kept in their shortest possible positions day after day, week after week. And it's a problem.
I got to get better doing more of like the lunge, was it couch stretch, lunge stretch?
Yeah.
I guess they're doing more of those, but like I just started getting a little pain there, and same thing. Like when you squat down, it's like, oh, okay, I can feel it, but then I just take that lacrosse ball and just kind of wedge it in there.
I got to tell you, the standing desks, I think, if possible, that the prices really come down to make them reasonable. I've got a lot of
I got the ones right there, which that rises up.
That's
it's
right.
Not a true standing desk. It's like a platform that goes on it.
That's all I have. I just ordered one for just a laptop size one because that's what I use at the office. And my office manager Tammy uses one. There's a catchphrase the last couple of years with posture, because standing all day isn't necessarily ideal either. Mm-hmm. And the phrase you hear bouncing around sometimes is the best posture is the next posture, meaning we actually do best with variability. So I always tell people, or just stand for an hour or two, then sit for an hour or two, or stand for an hour, sit for an hour, and just kind of rotate it. So one of those cheap, for a couple $100, you can get those little standing desks that just mount. They just sit right on top of your existing table. Mm-hmm. Works great. Works absolutely great. We just got to move around a little more.
I also bought. I have to show you. It's behind that. I believe behind that picture frame, and it's like or maybe it's right behind. Somewhere back there.
Oh, the black.
Oh, can you see it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So it's a big mat, and it has kind of like a half foam rollers, kind of ribbed on it, a little like a half ball kind of thing. So I've been bad at using it. My old office, I used it all the time because I pulled up from underneath the desk. Yep. But basically, I would stand on it. I have a lacrosse ball in my
roll your foot.
I roll it on the bottom of my foot, even when I'm sitting, just for like the plantar, right, or the fascia.
Plantar fascia. Yeah, you're right.
So I just roll it on the bottom of my foot. So I have a lacrosse ball. I used to have a foam roller here, but I took it home. I got a yoga mat too. I was doing yoga here for a while. So like, there's just little things I do to try to loosen up, because, and I know that's one of the topics I think we talked about was, or you like talking about, is just like office maintenance, or like office, I guess, mobility, because I saw something the other day, which I don't think it was, kind of an exaggeration, but it said sitting's the new smoking, but it's in the same wavelength in the sense that it's not good for you,
right?
But I think so. I guess talk about that. If you're like working at a desk, because I know a lot of people that listen to this don't adhere to this kind of stuff, I'm sure. So
and no one cares until they start to hurt. Mm-hmm. That's the problem. Is their setup's always perfect until it isn't. So
now the other thing that you do is you work for Rock Tape.
Yeah.
So kind of go into that. Like, how'd you get into it? What do you do for Rock Tape? And kind of talk about the different courses that you teach with that, because they're pretty cool. Because I've seen you, I guess.
Yeah. So as I mentioned a few times, I've got this bug for travel. It's been a priority of mine. I wish it had been a priority even a little younger. I probably, if I would have had my druthers, to use an old word, I probably would have taken a year or two after college or before college and kind of traveled the world when I could have done it super cheap. I don't live fancy. I drive my old used Honda Civic, live in a 3-bedroom house here in the city. And about 10 years ago, I just made the decision that any extra money that I had was going to be toward travel. So a few years ago, I finally started taking a 2-week vacation every summer. Not this summer, first time in 3 or 4 years. And I wish I would have done it sooner. So to tie into your question, I'm always looking for an excuse to get out of Dodge. Plattsburgh can be great, but Plattsburgh can also be a little confining at times if you're a little adventurous spirit. Sometimes, like I have, I sometimes, if I'm getting a little grouchy, my wife has been known to comment over the years. She goes, "Do you have a trip coming up?" Because I just get a little stir crazy in one place too long. So I've always been interested in teaching, lecturing, whatever. And I had done it occasionally years ago, and it just happens I was down in Florida giving a 3 or 4 hour continuing education talk to the Florida Chiropractic Annual Seminar. I walked out, and this woman from Rock Tape. Now, Rock Tape is a a sports medicine kind of supply company. They make kinesiology tape, the colored tape you see on practically all the athletes now if you watch sports on TV. That's where they started. Now they've branched into making other massage tools. They make rehab equipment, all kinds of different stuff. Turns out one of the education leaders for Rock Tape happened to be just watching in the back of the room as I did my lecture. And she goes, "Hey, can I buy you dinner?" And I said, "Sure." So we talked over dinner, and she said, "I love your style. You're an athlete yourself and still an athlete or trying to be. I think you'd be a good fit in our culture." And so I got on. That was 6.5 years ago. And at the time when I started teaching Rock Tape weekends, I want to say there were only maybe 8 or 10 instructors nationally that Rock Tape was using. And basically what we do is we go and teach other medical professionals how to use these tools, how to tape properly, how to use the instrument, the massage blades, how to use cupping, how to use compression wrap. And now basically there's 4 weekend courses that I teach. There's probably 20 or 30 instructors now. It's grown so much. And it's basically 12-hour weekends. So it's 6-hour classes on Saturday, 6-hour classes Sunday on one of these 4 topics where I am lecturing to a room of anyone from chiropractors, physical therapists, occupational therapists, massage therapists, acupuncture, really anyone in the medical field that wants to learn how to use these tools. Mm-hmm. So before the COVID stuff, I was teaching for the last 6 years. I was averaging 20 to 25 weekends a year I was teaching all over the country. Wow. Which is why I'm only usually in my office 3.5 days a week, because I'm basically flying every other weekend. And I like it. It gets old. Trust me, if you're doing like 5-6 weekends in a row flying, mm-hmm. And working a regular job during the week, it definitely grows old. So I've been trying the last year or two to find a little better pace for my teaching, but it's nice. I mean, even when you're going to a place that doesn't on the surface seem interesting, I'm always pleasantly surprised. For instance, I've been down to 3 times for some reason over the last 2 years. I've been to Fort Wayne, Indiana. Now, no offense to Fort Wayne. Never really thought about Fort Wayne before. And you go in and it's like this typical surprise Midwestern city of like 100 and something thousand people, legit skyscraper downtown. And now I've been a few times. So I know a couple of cool restaurants, a couple of places to grab a good beer. Yeah. I'm always traveling by myself. So yeah. I'm usually walking around just sightseeing in towns. And it's a great way to see the world.
So when you would typically fly in at some point, get there Friday evening. So you'd have pretty much Friday evening, Saturday evening, and then fly out Sunday?
Try to fly out Friday because now, with travel, God knows now, but even before all the COVID stuff, you never knew when you're going to get delayed or bumped or canceled. So I try to fly out sometime Friday morning. Depending if I'm going west or staying on the East Coast, I'd usually arrive in the city sometime Friday between noon and dinner time, mm-hmm. And then check into the hotel, rent a car in a lot of cases, drive to the hotel, check in, try to find a late dinner, relax, and then get up real early. Used to teach from basically get at the venue by 7 a.m. class from 8 to 3 with an hour for lunch. Do the same thing Sunday, and then the mad rush at 3 o'clock to find a FedEx drop store to drop the supply boxes off to ship back to Rock Tape. On the way to the airport, drop the rental car, and then usually sprinting through security to try to catch the last flight home on a Sunday night.
So you get home like Sunday evening?
No, Sunday night, usually late. So and especially with Burlington, I can't tell you how many speed limit pushings I've done from the ferry from the airport to the last ferry, at like midnight before you sit in your car for 40 minutes waiting for the next ferry. Yeah. It's not, or oftentimes I got my Nexus card for the Canadian border years and years and years ago. So I would say I fly out of Montreal 8 times out of 10 now.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just better options, better connections. And with my Nexus card, I don't have to deal with the border.
You were the one that told us to get a Nexus card.
It's fantastic. Now I don't know when you're going to be able to get one again, but
we've only used it a couple times, but both kids have one now. So really our whole family, if we go up, we're good. So I guess so Rock Tape, did you have to when you learned all the stuff, did you learn it all in one shot? Like same thing? Like when she approached you 6.5 years ago, were you already kind of in the Rock Tape space?
I was using Rock Tape. I had taken a different brand, education brand of taping course years and years and years ago as a new grad. Kinesio Tape was the original Kinesio tape maker. So I had been in that field taping people and had been using rock tape. But at the time, 6 years ago, that's the only course they taught was taping. So the first couple of years, that's the only course I was teaching for them a bunch of times a year. And then over the last 4 years, each year they've added new courses to where we are now.
Well, like Gina, when she always asks, "Can I take this course?" I'm like, "Take all this. Like, if it's getting you better,
it's tools in the toolbox, man.
Yeah, and it's like,
all it is.
Because I do the same for real estate. Like, if a course here, a course there. If I think I'm going to get just a little bit better, I'll take it. So,
and I tell people, you don't have to take. You're going to be with me for the next 12 hours this weekend. If you can get 2 or 3 key pullaways that you can have in your toolbox, particularly if you work with athletes, that's what I've said over the years is. Athletes can just smell a BSer a mile away. They just can, because most of them, especially the elite athletes, have been worked on by dozens of people as they travel. There's this and there's this and there's this. And you better at least be proficient, because they will ask you to do stuff to them. They know what works for them. I got someone coming through town. They're like, "Hey, I need you to use the blades on my calf, and I'd love if you could tape me after." Okay.
Yeah.
You better know how to do that.
So do you get a lot of random drop-ins like that?
No, not a ton. I mean,
you probably can't fit them in, to be honest.
Well, no. I usually make as busy as I am. I usually, for an athlete, and I tell all my regular patients that I go, I am busy. I said, if you ever check my online schedule and don't see an opening within a day or two, just call. We always have a cancellation list. And if not, I usually 9 times out of 10, I can stay late and jam you in.
Well, you've gotten me in before if I've had like a real bad neck or migraine. You'll like get me in with next day. Like, I'll just run in for like 5 minutes and you're working on it fast. And
I've had a few, not really random. They've scheduled, or I've had a couple of people from out of town. Like, again, this is not in the last 3 or 4 months, but a friend from Jersey or something would say, "Hey, I've got this, Olympic swimmer that trains with me. She's vacationing or on her way up through to Canada for some reason. Can she schedule an appointment? Can you take a look at her?" But unfortunately, there isn't a lot around here. I mean, we are pretty isolated in the grand scheme of things. Not that it can't be a great. I mean, look at this today.
Nice
lake, 85, no humidity. What do we get? Like, historically about 5 of these a year.
Yeah.
So it's tough, and it's one thing that I've always been a little. I'm getting better as I get older, but when I was a little younger, I was always a little jealous when I'd travel to these seminars, because I'd see some colleagues that work with professional sports teams, and in some cases, they're not even that good. Not to toot my own horn. The thing with pro sports, and you'd like to think it would be the opposite, that these pro teams with literally hundreds of millions of dollars and contracts to protect, that they would have just researched the heck out of anyone who's coming in contact with these athletes. And in a lot of cases, it's just not true. It's alarming who ends up working for these professional sports teams. Yeah. And a lot of times it's pure proximity. That, Joe Chiro or Joe physical therapist just happens to have a clinic where the team practices, and 1 or 2 athletes kind of stumble in on their own, and then word spreads, and all of a sudden, "Hey, can you just come into the locker room and work on us?"
Some random guy on the staff works there, and he's like, "Oh, my guy's good."
Exactly. And that's really the foot in the door with pro sports and we are just so far from any pro sports.
Pro sports, I think, would be hard, though, because like you said, if they're playing a regular season or you have to travel, or I'm assuming if you're with pro sports, you'd almost be like on staff, but you'd be paid by them, where they'd be like, "We need you here these days and that day," which for you, that could screw up your practice.
Oh, there would be no practice.
Yeah, you would have a hard time. It'd be like your full-time gig.
So I had a good friend 3 or 4 years ago at the peak of the Warriors run in the NBA, the Curry, they won the championship, and they were right in I think it was 2015, so right in the peak of that record-breaking win season.
Yep.
And she was an Australian girl that I had met in Australia, one of the trips over there teaching. And they overhauled their whole athletic training staff. And she was named head physical therapist for the Golden State Warriors. And so I had emailed her a few times just asking how things were going. I saw her on the sidelines a couple of times. And I said, "Oh, I know who that is." And so I emailed her. And it's a crazy schedule. I mean, you think about it, because she's full-time with a small staff. So you're road games and home games. What are they up to? 82 games a year? Yeah. So it's, 3 a week on average. So
she travels with the team.
It's full-time with the team. So basically they would get a month off, and particularly long if you got a team going deep into the playoffs. So basically that 5-6 year run, they're into at least the end of June. So basically her off season was like mid-July to mid-end of August. And then she's on the road again for preseason camp starting in September. Yeah. And so it's, 82 games, then the playoffs. Now, I think she made decent money. I never would have asked her. I've known a few other people working for pro teams. The money is decent. You got to question how good it is, though, when you look at how long away from home you are.
Yeah.
But the payoff comes in the playoffs. So what they have is basically this lump sum of money, and the more you make more bonus money, the more deeper into the playoffs you go.
So you're the biggest fan.
So I remember the guy I talked with on the phone from the Warriors, and he said the previous athletic trainer, the year they went to the finals, I think he said he made like $125,000 as head trainer bonus just from the playoff run, winning the finals, which was more than his actual salary was for the regular season. So, I guess the payoff is kind of like a lotto if you end up with a team that goes deep. But yeah, it's interesting. I think football would probably be, in a way, the easiest just from a travel perspective, because they're only playing basically 9 away games a year.
Yeah.
If you lived in a big city. But yeah, at some point, I always dreamed. I think my dream gig would be either getting on the PGA Tour with a player.
I would love that. Yeah.
Well, just from a pure weather, they're just going from one beautiful spot to the next, or triathlon. Triathlon's just like they're in Australia now. They're in the Philippines. They're in Spain. They're in so these good weather sports. I'm sick. Too many years working at 20 below on the top of a bobsled track at 7 a.m. is gotten a little old. So I think I'm going to try to gear toward the warm weather sports.
Well, I absolutely love golf. So and I grew up loving golf even more. So the PGA Tour, if someone asked me what professional sport you would want to play, I always said the PGA Tour because now granted, you pick your own schedule within reason, because there's some guys that have to play every week to survive,
right.
But there's the better players, they pick and choose and sponsorships, but then you're pretty much your own. I love team sports, but there's also the element of you can just kind of run your show, run your schedule. So same thing, you show up and you can work on athletes or work on the golfers behind the scenes kind of thing. And again, for most of those guys, it's just some realignment. But the thing with golf is, I know some people is it a sport or not? I mean, now it's on the point where you can't. I think it's hard to argue it's not a sport based on how physically fit some of those guys are. But you talk about they're going from a static position where they're completely coiled to this huge kinetic release of energy, typically around a knee, a hip. Those are your kind of points of your pivot points or whatever. And to be able to hit a golf ball, and I've been to actually quite a few professional golf tournaments, and to watch these guys. And when you talk about the mile or the marathon runner, golf to me is the most baseball is pretty impressive because they hit a ball being thrown at them, but golf, how good those guys are hitting a golf ball is insane, because every shot, I take the best shots I've ever hit in my life, the most purest shots I've ever hit. If I could count a couple of those off the top of my head, that's every shot for them.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely insane.
I'm not a golfer. I know the biomechanical requirements of the sport, but I'm not a golfer. It's the consistency with those guys, among other things, that even the top area amateurs that are winning some of the local club championships here, that might be scratch or maybe a 4 handicap or something, is they're really good, but they've got plenty of bad shots in a round or over the course of a few rounds on a week, where a lot of those guys just don't. They're consistent. So a little aside, which I always find, because this just came up in my office on Thursday, I had an older gentleman, had really hurt his back. I forget how, but hurt his back a couple of weeks ago doing something stupid. He's loves golf. He is out, retired guy, this summertime around here. He is out 5-6 days a week minimum. And it's been killing him for 2 weeks. He's just been in too much pain. He didn't even dare swing a club. I asked him. So I saw him Thursday. He's doing a lot better. A little bit of pain, stiffness, but nothing severe. And he goes, Doc, do you think it's okay if I'm supposed to play golf tomorrow? I'm a little nervous. I'm like, no, go ahead. Just warm up really well. Do the things we talked about. If you got any sharp pain, just bail.
Yeah.
And I would recommend walking. Get out of the cart and actually walk the course. It's great for the back. Okay. So I followed up with him I guess that was Tuesday. I followed up with him Thursday, just because I knew he was playing Wednesday. And I said, how'd you play? Did you finish? He goes, yeah. He goes, and this is my point. I've heard this story 100 times over the years, and guys are so stupid sometimes and stubborn, because I go, how'd you play? He goes, back felt pretty good, a little tight at first, but really felt good. I go, how'd you play, more importantly? And he goes, it's the best round I've played in 3 years. And I said, okay, why do you think that is? what did you do differently? And what do you think his answer
Did he
was?
walk?
No, well, he walked, yes, but
Okay.
his swing itself with it coming off a bad back.
Yeah, he didn't. He basically went about 78% of what he normally swings.
He basically was half swinging out of caution, and guess what? He was hitting the ball straight as an arrow every time.
Yeah.
And like I said, hundreds of times I've had this same response where a guy's coming off back pain. They're swinging 70%, have the best round of their life, and then within 2 weeks, they start trying to crush the ball again, and they're right back to square one. And if you just slow everything down, yeah, you'll lose 20, 30 yards, but it'll be straight every time, or most times. I don't know. We're stubborn.
Well, that's it. And again, for how many years I've played golf, it's like you still get in the habit of trying to kill a golf ball. And it's like really all it is how smooth and just like turning into everything just has to be, again, a kinetic kind of like, it goes like do, and then you hit the ball.
And
it's funny.
Yeah, well, the problem is, and particularly the people I see in my office, just to kind of bring it around full circle with golf, there's a huge injury rate with recreational golfers. I mean, not up in the recreational runner territory, but it's still high. And where do you typically see these men and women injured? It's either their low backs typically, or it's their knees. Mm-hmm. And the reason is there's a philosophy with basic human function that's called the joint by joint approach, and it's been around for a few decades, not by me. A guy by the name of Gray Cook and Mike Boyle kind of came up with this philosophy that basically the joints of the body alternate needs joint by joint from the ground up, meaning what do they need to do primarily to function properly? Mm-hmm. Do they need to be mainly mobile joints that can be loose and move through a range of motion smoothly? Or is it a part of the body that really needs to be more stable and strong and stiff? Mm-hmm. And it's just funny, but the body alternates those joint by joint from the ground up. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, the ankle needs to be, oddly enough, people mix this up because they always think of ankle sprains, but the ankle needs to be a mobile joint, mainly dorsiflexion. So pointing and flexing the toes and ankle up and down.
Yep.
The knee actually is not designed to move excessively. It should be kind of a stable joint. Mm-hmm. Getting to golf, the hips need to be mobile. The lumbar spine, the lower back needs to be stable. Most low back injuries happen when the body moves excessively. The lumbar spine is loaded excessively through a range of motion, mm-hmm. and everything locks up and seizes up on you. So now you take your average, maybe a little overweight, mm-hmm. Just occasionally here in the North Country, mm-hmm. you got a little belly on you.
Michigans, yep.
A beer belly. They sit all day long, and now they're 58, 62 years old, and sit all winter and do nothing. Mm-hmm. And then come the first warm day in April or early May, they're out there swinging the club, literally 100 plus miles an hour. Mm-hmm. Now, most likely they have zero hip mobility. You just check like their rotation of their hips, internal, external rotation. They've got none, yet they're swinging the hell out of the golf club. So where are they getting that rotation from that they should be getting from the hips? Well, guess what? They're going to get it from the joint above or the joint below the hips, which are what? Like the low back and the knee. And so you'll see people either with low back pain or knee pain, and it's nothing to do with their back or their knee in a lot of cases. It's their lack of hip mobility. So if you're going to give one tip to particularly the aging or really casual golfer that doesn't swing a ton 6 months a year, is work on hip mobility, and you can just Google hip mobility drills or exercises for golfers, and you probably find 7,000 of them. Pick 3 or 4 and just try working them a little bit.
Yeah, and I've seen there's some pro golf things now if you go on and look, and some of the stuff the pros do, and it's pretty crazy. A lot of those guys go to the gym now.
Well, you look at them. I mean, other than there's a few still kind of old school souls I can see walking around, but most of them, I mean, you look at Tiger, you look at Rory, you look at, and even now, what's his name? Who just
Brooks
won?
Koepka,
but the Bryson, who just won yesterday. I mean, now, granted, he's not carrying too much about body fat either, but he just straight up said, I'm going to gain 40 pounds and see it, and all of a sudden it averaged, 40 yards to his drive or something ridiculous.
He's the first golfer. I didn't realize he won because I saw it a little bit on Saturday. He's the first golfer I've ever known that has put weight on, like a football player.
Yeah.
And if you watch him swing, the funny thing is when you watch him swing, his swing isn't as nice because he's a little bulkier now. But he's driving the ball consistently like 340, 350, which is absolutely insane.
Well, and I forget the numbers, but you can't beat pure mass when you're talking about creating power sometimes. Yes, it's a combination of speed as well. But it really is, it's so advantageous to be big and strong, even if some of that weight is fat. In certain events. The other one that always hit me is, I forget, I read this quote by a baseball therapist last year, and I'm guessing, but I'm not far off. He basically posted this thing on Instagram that said, if you look at the top, I forget if it was 20 or 25 Hall of Fame pitchers, okay? You Clemens, Nolan Ryan, all the big, and even the current guys like Kershaw, Baumgartner, this guy, like all but 2 or 3 were 220 pounds or heavier.
Yeah.
When they played.
Pedro was probably the smallest.
Well, they're the outliers. Yeah. Pedro and Greg Maddux.
Yeah.
But a lot of times too,
Randy Johnson was
huge.
Yeah.
But a lot of times with these guys, they're short in careers because they're basically arming everything, and they can be freaks of the freaks like Pedro, but a lot of times end up breaking down physically or lose what got him there quicker than these guys. Like, I mean, look at the epitome is Nolan Ryan. He playing into his mid 40s, still throwing high 90s, and really relatively injury free for the majority of his career. So just you lump him in with Bryson there. It's just you can't. The guy's point of his post was, hey, parents of aspiring major league pitchers, yes, get them in the weight room, but don't forget to feed them. Like eat and eat some more.
Well, so Gina's cousin is a good baseball player locally, and the same thing. He was like one of those just typical tall, lanky, athletic kids, no muscle to him at all. And I think he gained like 25 pounds from last year to this year. Well, he was a very good basketball player. He's going to go play, I don't know, whatever division level it is, but baseball. But that's the thing. And I remember his parents like asking me, and I was like, so that kid should just be eating everything in sight. Yeah. And I said, give him milkshakes every night. I said, who cares? Because at the end of the day, he's got to put weight on. And he was doing that. I mean, I think he got some, mass gainer shakes and stuff. But like my own sake, I think in January, back in October, I went a bunch of weeks without going to the gym. And I think I told you this back in October or back in the fall. So it was like, I'm like, okay, I'm going to start working out again, start watching what I eat. Well, from October to January, I felt great. I was eating enough. I leaned out. I was down to like 160 or 165, which is too light for me. Yeah. Right now, I think I'm almost 200 because I've just been trying to gain weight over the basic quarantine. But it was like, I've just been doing, it was more like just powerlifting, just like benching, squatting, deadlifting, and pressing, and just eating to gain strength back because I had just gotten to the point where I was just much lighter than I ever was in the last 10 years. And so the same thing, like putting mass on, like putting on probably 30 pounds worth of weight. And I don't know if I'm actually 30, but around that, but I've been diligent about trying to gain weight, and it's tough to eat enough. So I've been drinking a lot of shakes, but the difference between me at 160 versus now, and ideally I'll start leaning out back to probably about mid 180s, but that's like a really good weight for me versus 160. I was way too little. Like
it's a conversation I have a lot in the office is nutrition. What way should I be eating? Just they're casual conversation while I'm working on people that come up. Like, what do you do? What kind of diet do you follow? What is this? What do you think of this? What do you think of intermittent fasting? What do you think of these running shoes?
Keto and all the buzzwords.
Yeah, and I say there's very little wrong. They're just varying degrees of right. Is a phrase I use when I teach a lot. As long as you are keeping kind of some core fundamental concepts together, the question I ask the people is, what is your goal? What is your goal? And because people just hear this crap all the time, they're being bombarded with just this nonsense from magazines and internet and Dr. Google and all this stuff. And I just ask, what is your goal? Because that's all that really matters. If your goal is, I didn't like the way I felt, I was getting sick all the time at 160, and I just felt weak and tired walking upstairs. My own goal for the next 2 months, in your case, or 3 months, I'm just going to try to put on 15 or 20 pounds. Now, do the type of calories matter for those 2 or 3 months? Maybe not. I don't know. No. I can't answer for you, but
no, they're bad.
And not that you want to be eating Twinkies and ice cream, but if you're eating fairly clean and you don't usually, maybe you do a little low carb sometimes, and all of a sudden now you're eating more, a few nights of pasta a week, then maybe that's not a big deal if that's the goal. The one I hear all the time is people usually around, here is losing weight. Like, oh man, I just can't lose those, 30, 40 pounds. And I say, well, what are you eating in it? What's a typical day? Yeah. And with all the good intentions, they're having like 4 or 5 servings of fruit a day. Now, I'm not one to tell you that fruit is necessarily inherently bad for you. There's certainly some good stuff, but
a lot of sugar.
If your goal is to lose body weight, then fruit, especially 5 servings or 4 bananas a day, probably isn't the best to reach your goal, and say, hey, maybe 1 serving of berries. That's a little lower in the, the simple sugars, and just keep it. And so anyway, it's just, there's not right or wrong. It just really depends on what you're shooting for. I know what works for me, and I'm pretty extreme in that way.
Yeah.
But I've self-experimented for the last 10 years on me.
I think if you have anybody that I know that has an interest in losing or gaining weight, I don't think it's that hard to do if you make it a habit and just kind of make it like if you wanted to lose weight, if you understand how to lose weight and what to eat correctly, and you make it a habit to do so, you'll be fine. Like, you'll be able to keep your weight off. I think it's the people that want to lose weight, they just don't know what to do.
Well, that's it.
And that's yes.
You just got to watch the TV shows. I mean, there's series after series of this where people, it's just bad information for a million reasons. Maybe they don't want to hear it, but a lot of times it's just they're given wrong information.
Like I have friends that I'm on the keto diet. I know people are like, I'm on the keto diet. I'm like, you're on the keto diet for 2 weeks until you want to have something normal. Yep. And I said, the way I've always looked at food is like, I'm going to eat good food. I'm not going to try to eat processed food. I'm going to try to not eat sugar. Yeah. I eat a lot of rice. I eat, that's where most of my carb intake's rice. Maybe some potatoes. I don't eat a ton of pasta, but depending. But a lot of it's just meats, vegetables, rice, fruits, like good fats. Like, I just kind of eat a balanced diet and then just know roughly what I should eat. And a lot of the times it's based off of how I feel. My biggest issue is I'll go, once I get to start work or whatever, I'll go the whole day without eating just because I'm busy. And it's like, and the girls are good here because they'll hound me like, did you eat lunch today? And I'm like, no. Yeah. So even today's been a bad eating day for me just because you're just running around. As I'm sure you are too, just boom, 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 and sit down for 10, 20 minutes to eat is tough. Yeah.
You just got to find what works for you.
Last thing I wanted to touch base on was, do you still do a lot of keynotes, kind of speak? Because we had. I mean, some of these said you did quite a bit of, and some of these are like Chiropractic Association of Australia, European Chiropractic Union, World Chiropractic Congress. Yep. So I'm assuming, again, from the chiropractic industry, these are pretty big events. Yeah. Yeah. So to be talking at this, you must be talking to, quite a few people.
Yeah, it depends. Some of them are smaller, but a lot of them, like I did, probably my most intimidating, I remember it like it was yesterday, was a few years ago in Guadalajara, Mexico, where they were having the Pan American Games, which is basically all of Central America, North America, like a little mini Olympics they do. And a few months prior to the actual games, they did what they called their Sports Medicine Congress. So that was all the teams, the medical teams from all these countries came together for their own little weekend seminar. And they asked me to do an hour keynote on my experience with the Paralympic Games, meaning, and basically I put together from scratch this talk that was medical concerns and unique kind of challenges working with these athletes, and some of the unique medical stuff that come about with people that have spinal cord injury. And so I get in. Now, as anyone who fears public speaking, I'd been doing it for a little while at that point, not nearly. I'd be much more comfortable today than I was, 6-7 years ago. So I go into this room, and I like to know who I'm speaking to, who's in the crowd. I'm meticulous with that. I want to know roughly the size. Are they medical doctors? Are they chiros? Are they PT? No one was giving any information. English was not great, with some of the people that were organizing, and I don't speak any Spanish other than a few words. And so I walk into the room, and it was 500 people. Probably 489 of them were medical doctors. So I am talking to a room of international MDs. I'm this little lowly, chiro from Plattsburgh, New York, who doing the talk also for the first time, which is always interesting, for an hour. Now, to add to the nervousness, they're miking me up offside before they introduce me, and all they said is, you've got to really speak slower than normal because we have translators. So they had everyone that didn't speak English had a headset, and they were doing Spanish translations to people. Well, I had always pictured, they would be in the back in like a booth. Well, so I start talking, and they've got they have the translator basically stage right in kind of an open booth. It kind of had plastic. I could hear them talking constantly out of my right ear as I'm kind of presenting. So they said, we're going to go for 30 minutes. We're going to take a 10-minute break, let people go see the vendors. So halfway through, and they had warned me, they said, you have to be careful. Don't talk in kind of like slang, euphemisms that
That I would appreciate, yeah.
that aren't going to translate literally.
Oh, okay.
Because it won't make sense. And so I was really conscious of that. It was a new talk. I was intimidated by the crowd. I come up at the 30-minute mark on the break, and I go, how am I doing? Am I doing? Guy's like, you got to just slow it. And I thought I was like a turtle, crawling. And he goes, you got to slow it down more. And he goes, and watch the catchphrase. I'm like, what are you talking? Like, I didn't think he said twice. You said, I like to think outside the box. Now that's a saying we'd say 100 times without even. And clearly, I did say it a couple of. And he said they're trying to translate the concept of think outside the box into Spanish, and it does not translate. And so you're going to confuse people. So anyway, it ended up going well. I survived. I got a few really good comments after that made me and that kind of vaulted me into searching out, doing it a little more regularly, and got me into the continuing ed. But yeah, it's a cool experience. I've gotten to travel. I've been to Australia now, I think 4 times. That's cool. 4 separate trips, and that's been great. Always looking, hopefully this whole COVID stuff, I've kind of 2020s, I've mentally kind of put it as a wash for travel. I'm hoping maybe a few things toward the end of the year, but vacation wise, I'm just planning on 2021. I'd like to add to my country list. So
you must have some good flyer rewards, flyer miles.
You'd think so, but they make it so hard now.
Do they?
It just is. Yeah.
Are you like a one brand or one
no,
brand
that's
airline?
That's the problem. So if I'm traveling for Rock Tape 25 times a year, it's kind of like, hey, they don't mind if you pay a few bucks extra, but I don't want to see you spending, $1,200 for a flight from Burlington to Philly either. So you kind of have to go with whatever flight is given the best price.
Yeah.
And when you're flying to so many different cities, it's always different airlines, different hubs depending on where you're going. So,
and from a travel perspective, are you a pretty minimalist travel guy?
I can't even. You have no idea. It's how I pride myself on the minimalism.
I was gonna say, guys that travel a lot, I've heard that it's just like you probably have like a bag that can fit like under your seat, and that's about it. Like a little bag.
Let me put it this way: I once had. It wasn't by choice, but I once had to fly to New Zealand I was living in Minnesota at the time. I flew from Minneapolis to New Zealand door to door in 5 days. I was only on the ground in New Zealand for 72 hours. I went with a literally like a school backpack for 3 days to New Zealand. The lady thought I was nuts, the stewardess, when I boarded. She goes, "Wait, is that all you have?" And I said, "There's a couple of rolled up suits," and that was it. Yeah. So yeah, now the best. But besides that, what I'm most proud of is turning my wife into someone who never traveled. Now she's into it. But the big sell, especially, stereotypically, women sometimes struggle a little bit more with, they got more to carry. I'll give them that. We just went last summer for basically, it ended up being like 16 days to Vietnam.
Really?
Probably the favorite country I've ever been. It's a phenomenal trip. And we went for 15 or 16 days with each just a backpack.
Wow.
A 30-liter, not this huge, Appalachian Trail, a 30-liter backpack, one for me, one for my wife, for a 15-day trip.
How many shoes did you bring? Just one pair?
One.
Was that also like running shoe? And
no. I'm sorry. Take it back. I wore my running sneakers on the plane, and then my trusted Chaco sandals that I've had 2 of these in 25 years. Really? That's all I wear in the summer. Paired it so I could get a workout in, and then just had the sandals strapped to the outside. So 2 pairs for 2 weeks. Laundry one time.
That's great.
Just lots of black shirts and shorts, man. It's great. So.
I was gonna say the traveling tips alone are probably worth reaching out for you.
It is. I've had several patients that have offered to pay to find cheap trips. So I suppose if anybody wants to reach out, if I get the demand, maybe I'll start a business up.
Travel agency.
Travel hacking. Yeah.
There you go. Not a good year to start, but 2021 it's coming out.
There you go.
All right, John, I appreciate you coming on. If you guys, if anybody wants to find you, how can they find you?
A couple different ways. Needs. Yeah, if it's clinic related, if you're injured, even if you're not injured, I get a lot of people just want a kind of consultation and say, hey, can you? I've always, when I start running more, this bothers me, or my hip bothers me, or looking to improve performance. Can you check me out? You can go to my website, which is www.theidealathlete.com. That's just The Ideal Athlete, all one word. And you can see book now buttons. I book everything online. It's another cool thing that my office does, all online booking. If you're just casual, want to reach out to me, you can probably best bets to go through Instagram, which is just Jon_Mulholland, JON_MULHOLLAND.
Perfect. All right, John, I appreciate it. That is episode 75 of the Gaelan Trombley Show.
Cool, buddy.
Thanks for listening to the Gaelan Trombley Show. If you want to reach me, you can go on Facebook at Gaelan Trombley, on Instagram at Gaelan Trombley, and on YouTube at Gaelan Trombley. The spelling, GAELANTROMBLEY.